interesting session because we're really going to be talking to farmers around the world around the challenges facing farmers in producing nutritious food for the world and also being stewards of the land, especially in this difficult time of COVID-19. And so I think you'll find this a very rich conversation. We're going to be joined during this session by 3 farmers from around the world, like I mentioned, starting off with Jake Legui from Saskatchewan with a 14,000 acre farm. Then we're going to move over to India to talk to a smallholder farmer around her challenges, but also the opportunity she sees in feeding the world. And then we're going to end our conversation in South Africa, talking to the president of the World Farmers Organization to find out his perspective around the issues that farmers are facing and how you can raise your voice to support them in making sure we have sustainable food systems that allow us to live within the ecological boundaries of the planet. So with that brief introduction, I want to dive right in, introduce our first farmer, Jake Legui from Saskatchewan. Jake, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Jake, I know that you're managing a very large farm, 14,500 acres up in Saskatchewan. And I think just to give our audience a flavor for the work that you do, we have a video that you took with your mobile phone of the harvest. So, maybe we want to just give the audience an introduction to that video and then we'll launch into the video.
Yeah, so I shot the video while I was operating a combine, harvesting durum wheat, and just sort of narrated what I was seeing and what I was up to. So hope you enjoy it.
All right, well, let's go to the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake Legui, and I'm a farmer from Western Canada in the province of Saskatchewan. We're combining. So today we're harvesting durum. Durum is a type of wheat that's used to make pasta, specialty breads, noodles, and various other products. If you've ever had spaghetti, you've probably had Canadian durum. One of the cool things about combines and the technology we have these days is we actually get to see what that yield is in real time as we go across the field. So just looking at the monitor here where we get to view everything that goes on in this combine, you can see that number that keeps changing there, that 80, 90, down into the 70s. That's the yield in bushels per acre of the crop that we're taking off. So those are fantastic yields. Our field isn't going to average there, of course. It always looks better on the yield monitor than it does when you finally add it all up at the end, but those are great numbers to see. It means that we're doing something right in the crop that we're producing. And I'm just going to show you a couple other things on here that's really cool. So we've had auto steer for a long time in these combines. You can see that I'm not touching the steering wheel at all, but I'm also not touching the ground speed drive here because the combine's actually managing that for me with these settings right here. The control unit actually measures how much material is coming into the combine and then adjusts my speed accordingly. So it's great for novice operators, and it's even great for people like me who have run a combine a lot. Reduces operator fatigue and lets us run longer during the day. So it's cool stuff. So hey, thanks so much for taking the time to share a little bit about what a day in my life looks like at this time of the year, and go out and eat some Canadian durum. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for taking that video and giving our audience a little taste, pardon the pun, of durum wheat and how automated farming now has become. But that didn't always be the case. I know that you've been farming as a family for about over 40 years in this area, and maybe just want to walk through some of that evolution of your farm over that 40-year period, and maybe what you see happening over the next handful of years.
Sure. So yeah, I farm in the province of Saskatchewan, which is in Western Canada. So I farm with my parents, my wife, 2 young sons, sister, some other family members. We are a family farm. And what I mean when I say a family farm is that we're family owned and operated. There's no, outside people involved aside from various banks, of course, because if we're going to run equipment like that, it does take a little bit of help. So that's what a family farm looks like. We manage it and we do everything together. So we grow canola, durum, as you saw in the video, hard red spring wheat, lentils, peas, flax, various other crops depending on the year and the market conditions that we're dealing with. So one of the cool things about being in a family operation is the multi-generational legacy that comes with that. So my grandparents settled on the farm that we're still living on back in 1956. So we're third generation here. So I get to farm land that my grandfather farmed, which is pretty amazing. And it does also kind of help reinforce the idea that we really, in a sense, don't own the land, we're borrowing it. We're borrowing it from our kids, because the strategy that we have, and that most operations are family operated too, in North America and a lot of other places in the world, is that we want to have another generation here. So that influences how we think about everything that we do. And that's why soil health is such an important part of everything that we're doing. That's why we need access to, fertilizers and good genetics, crop protection products, and technology. All of these things together help us be better at what we do and help us be more sustainable. This year was really dry. We typically get about 325 to 350 millimeters of rain in a year in this part of the world. So we're pretty dry compared to a lot of other places in the world. This year was exceptionally dry, less than 100 millimeters of rainfall this year. And, my dad and my grandparents have experienced this in the 80s and the 30s and other years. But what we can do with that amount of rain today is absolutely remarkable. We can grow a good average crop in a year like this where they might not have had a crop at all. In a year like this in the 30s, grandpa's parents might have had a hard time putting food on the table. And that's because of the technology that we have access to, good genetics and good farming practices.
Well, one of those practices, Jake, was, the introduction of zero tillage. And maybe you just want to walk our audience through that, because it's such an important intervention that seems so simple on the surface, and yet it is actually quite complicated. But it speaks to your point about being good stewards of the land while still being able to operate under very dry conditions like you experienced this year.
Yeah, so I'll try and simplify it as much as I can. Maybe a good example is, for any of you that have had a garden or remember a garden at your parents' place when you were little or anything like that, you always work it up till the ground is black. And then you go and put your crop in, right? We don't do that anymore. So we leave the stubble out from last year's crop, stubble being what's left of the plant after we harvest it. And we directly seed into that. So that allows us to capture snow during the winter. It prevents erosion, and it just keeps the ground insulated. That's what no-till means, is that we're not going and flipping that soil over to try and create a proper seed bed, because we have the tools, good seeding equipment to be able to seed directly into that. It's been a huge benefit to the environment, and it's completely changed Western Canadian agriculture. There's no more dirt blowing in the air as a result of that.
Yeah, there's a very interesting movie out called Kissing the Soil, and it shows MODIS satellite imagery of clouds of soil going through the atmosphere during April, and how that changes as the crop gets established and grows, and it reverses that trend of capturing the carbon. And so your zero-till management of the soil is actually a very important intervention around climate change, because you're actually capturing a lot of carbon that's in the atmosphere and keeping it in the soil. And then the benefits you've already highlighted of increased soil moisture, increased soil health through microorganisms. So really, on the surface, a very simple intervention, but extremely complex, like you say, and important for modern agriculture. I'm very keen, you say it's a family farm, but it's a huge farm. I mean, 14,500 acres. Maybe it would be good for you to just explain how you manage that complexity, maintain diversity on the farm, so that it remains a very healthy farm.
Yeah, I mean, in Western Canada, there's a lot of farms this size or bigger. We're I would say maybe a moderate sized farm out here. In drier climates, it's easier to do broad acre farming because you can go bigger with the equipment, wider. And we don't have as much staff as a lot of people might think. There's 6 of us full-time on the farm, including my dad, myself, my sister, my brother-in-law, and a couple of full-time non-family employees. And then we bring in some extra help during harvest. So it's really just it's all about efficiencies and organizing everybody, to run all the various things and just trying to keep everything moving as much as we can. I won't say it's easy. It's not easy. I mean, it's awesome farming with family, but I mean, as you can imagine, it comes with challenges too. Farming with family means that there's a whole different culture around, hierarchy and how we kind of pick our roles and everything else. It's really, really interesting, and it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do.
So, maybe what's been the biggest change in farming, let's say in the last 5 years from your perspective, that you want our audience to know about producing food? Because we often take food for granted. We assume it just shows up in the grocery store, which that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing incredibly quickly. I mean, we have to be willing to learn and try new things on an annual basis and test and see what works and what doesn't. I guess we try again or we throw it out. In the last 5 years, just increasing precision. We're just learning more and more about each acre of land and breaking it down to smaller and smaller parts of the field. We don't manage these, 14,500 acres all as one field. I mean, we break it out into small, several acre sized zones. And that's how we manage it. And it's because of technology that we can do that. That was not possible even 20 years ago. It's been an amazing change. And, my grandma's still alive and we see her on a regular basis, and, we're telling her about the crops that we're getting and the things that we're doing, and she's blown away by it. It's something that she wishes she had access to when she was young. It would have been an absolute game changer for them, all of the things that we can do.
Well, you're a young farmer, and when we look at the age demographics of farming, that's not the norm, right? The average age of a farmer around the world is above, it's around 60, and so what would you say to the youth that are watching this that are thinking about farming? What would be sort of the inspiration that you would give them to be thinking about how they can contribute to farming or being a farmer themselves?
The thing about farming that if you want to do it, you have to be willing to do is to have an open mind and never stop learning. You have to be able to be fascinated by learning everything that you can. That's what is awesome about agriculture. We're never done. We're never done learning. So if you want to be involved in a farm, ask questions, try new things, see what works, see what doesn't work. Because I can tell you one thing, you go 30 miles west of here and farm in totally different soil and a different climate. That's how quickly it changes. So you have to just be willing to try and find people who have tried things and kind of stand on their shoulders. That's what farming's all about. We're doing that here, being a third generation farm. I know that I'm standing on my grandparents' shoulders, and the more you can do that, the more time you'll save yourself. But give it a try, go for it. It's an amazing thing to be able to grow something and see the finished product.
So one last question then. One area of interest for me, given the organization I work with, is on analyzing weather and looking at ways we can adapt to climate change. How are you adapting to climate change, and how is it impacting your farm? I mean, you already mentioned this year was a very dry year. Is that an issue for your farm, and how are you managing that?
One thing about farming is the weather is always one of either your biggest opportunity or biggest challenge. So we've always had to learn how to deal with extremes in climate. And, today we just have to keep adapting. And it comes back to trying new things, having technology. We need access to all the tools that are out there, from fertilizer to crop protection products to plant genetics to equipment technology. We need access to all of those things to be able to deal with challenging weather. The thing with challenging weather is you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know when that storm is going to show up and dump 6 inches of rain on a crop that's already ready to go to market. And it's devastating when that happens. We had that happen last harvest. It just wouldn't stop raining and snowing, and we couldn't get the crop off. And in fact, some of it overwintered, which we've never had happen before. But we just have to find ways to adapt. And that's something that I think farmers are maybe in some sense uniquely suited for, because it's what we do. Yeah,
no, that's well stated, including adapting to COVID-19, which in our conversation prior to this, you mentioned an unusual thing happening as far as your access to transportation services to get your durum wheat and other products to market through the rail line. Any other observations around COVID and its impact on farm operations such as yours?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, getting the product to market. I mean, we're 2,000 kilometers from the coast. So everything that we grow here has to be transported to the west coast or the east coast of Canada. So when you have anything that interrupts that logistics, system, including COVID, it can be a real challenge. One thing that COVID has done, though, is I think it's reminded people of the importance of food, the importance of good, nutritious food, and how vital it is to have access to it. So I think it's maybe put a little bit more emphasis on making sure that everybody has access to food and making sure that there's less roadblocks in the way of getting that food to market. So if there's a silver lining to the COVID situation, maybe it's that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Any sort of closing thoughts, Jake, you'd like to share with people that we haven't covered in our questions?
Well, I mean, I guess, one thing that I do want to mention is, Norman Borlaug put it well when he said, take it to the farmer. If you give farmers the ability to adapt to the situation that they find themselves in, they'll do it. So, give us the opportunity to grow good crops in a sustainable and efficient way, to grow good, nutritious food. We'll find a way to do it.
Excellent. Well stated. Actually, I had the privilege of having breakfast with Norman Borlaug when I worked at the International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement in Mexico. And you're exactly right. He's very passionate about demand-driven innovation that focuses science on the needs of farmers and making sure that we're very intentional about making it that it reaches farmers. Science, sitting on the benches isn't going to help farmers. We really got to get out there and communicate with farmers. And so this forum has been a great one. Thanks to Farming First for bringing this group together, because it allows scientists like me to communicate with farmers like you and seeing opportunities to collaborate. And Jake and I have already found one of them to follow up on after this venue. Jake, thanks so much for sharing your insights and passion of farming. And now we're going to jump all the way to the other side of the world, over to Madhya Pradesh, India, where we're going to learn about farming in that part of the world. So I'm going to hand it off to Deepak, who's going to introduce our next farmer.
Hi, David. Thank you for this. My name is Deepak. I am the country director for IDE here in Bangladesh. IDE is an organization where we work globally to improve food production and incomes of smallholder farmers by helping them access technologies, use new innovative ideas, and access more rewarding markets. I work in Bangladesh, but I'm super excited to take this conversation now from Canada to someplace unique. Our next speaker her name is Gayatri. She will be joining us today live from Madhya Pradesh in India, more specifically a place called Bhopal. And Gayatri was born in this beautiful hills near the Dharmashala in Himachal Pradesh in India to a farming family. Her passion for agriculture and rural development led her to gather deep expertise and to working in solving some of the most pressing challenges for farmers in India. From her early age, Gayatri started working to train farmers on sustainable agriculture practices. She's an awesome entrepreneur. She helped start the Green Leaf Produce, a project designed to organize smallholder farmers to grow appropriate food and access new markets. And interestingly, in 2016, she received the Hubert Humphrey Fellow, a very prestigious award, of course, and attended Cornell University in US to further her knowledge. She is a role model for many farmers and especially girls in India. And during my first conversation with her earlier this week, I was immediately impressed by her knowledge, her passion for her work. So without further ado, let me just transfer over this to Gayatri, and let's hear more from Gayatri. Over to you, Gayatri.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Gayatri. I'm from India. To be specific, I'm from the North Province, and I am a smallholder farmer growing wheat, paddy, corn, and vegetables. And as you would know, like in India, more than 70% of farmer are smallholder farmer who cultivates in less than 2 hectare farms. So as I am, and we cultivate in hilly region of North Province. So yeah, like my father and I initially practices traditional methods, which was very time consuming and we have very little access of the modern technologies such as available to the farmer in other countries such as weather information, when to harvest, when to plant the crops, and improve seed and technologies, seed tool technology and market related information. So so that all made me realize that if we have this agriculture extension and advisory services which can make our life more efficient and productive. That made then I started to access the extension services, which helps me and other farmer to to grow like better produce in our farms. So I would like to add a little story here, which is like how I have started to growing. Grabbing these extension services. So there was a time I was visiting to a seed store, and there was a agriculture extension officer happened to visit there, and he was speaking with this storekeeper that we are organizing a training. And I asked what training you are organizing. He said like we are organizing a seasonal vegetables training. I said okay, I want to attend that training. Can I, is it like can I attend? He said oh absolutely, you can join us. And that was the day like I got that opportunity, and where I got introduced with the subject matter specialist, the rice specialist, wheat specialist, potato specialist. And it was like I was thrilled, like like wow, that's what I was looking for. I was wondering for years, and today I got that all the things. So yeah, that's how like extension services came into my life. And interestingly that my small farmer soon became a experiential farm for youth and farmers, where I was able to demonstrate modern technology such as new or improved seed technology, uh, etc. And then like that helped me, and then that helped me to organize the exposure visits for farmers to train them in the best way to show the results. Although I was very happy, I was very happy that helping to my community, and I was happy to helping community, but there was something in my like my heart that I want to help more people. And like my outreach was limited at that point of time. And meanwhile I became I was elected as a farmer friend in my province. And that time I was became a bridge between farmer and agriculture agencies, and that extended my outreach to the more and more farmer. And I was able to help more than 300 farmer family who benefited with government schemes, and such as like making the compost, different type of compost and compost pits at their farmland. And also the exposure visit and accessing these services, market services and technology and that all. So that was really very exciting for me. And also like the the other interesting thing was that I was able also I started this SRI technique, the system of rice intensification. And that technique was like that double the farm, almost double their production. And farmer was very happy with the production. And I'm excited that the farmers are continuing that without my help. So that's how opportunity like rising and rising. And then soon after I I started, as you mentioned in the introduction, that I started a farmer enterprise called Greenleaf, where about 39 uh, got collective and started growing this chemical free produce, and we provide them the market and advisory and extension services. And one of the touching story from this farmer enterprise, there is a woman called Koshalya Devi. She was from a poor family, and she has a very small piece of land which was not sufficient to grow food produce to sell in the market. So with help of me, like she rented another piece of land, and where she started growing food produce and selling into the market with new technology and techniques. And so soon after, like her economic status grow like a grown up, and then she was able to send her kids to the private school. As you know, in India, private schools consider a good school. So she was sending her kids to the private school, and also she renovated her house, like which the wall was like falling almost like up 7 8 years, and they were unable to renovate that. So she renovated that, and also like she bought a mobile and refrigerator first time in her life. And also the family nutrition's health also improved in her family. So that I consider like my achievement and most the biggest accomplishment of my life. And I hope to help more farmer uh, like her, to more farmer in the coming state. Yeah, thanks.
Well, well done, Gayatri. I mean, that's such an amazingly inspiring story.
Thank
And
you.
for so many of us working in the food systems, you are truly our food hero. So, Gayatri, during this session and the earlier one with David and Jake, we were talking a little bit about listening and adapting and having the knowledge to adapt. That was quite an important emerging theme that came through. And I wanted to ask you, because you've been on both sides of this argument, as a farmer receiving information and utilizing it for your own good, and also as a trainer, because you did a lot of work on the extension services, right? So what are the
Yes.
important lessons that you've learned yourself on training farmers? Because there are so many other smallholder farmers across the world, in Asia and Africa and Central and Latin America. What are the lessons that we can extract from your own experience?
Very interesting and valid question you have asked, Deepak. So as a trainer and as a bridge between farmer and agency, so I realized that if we want my learning is that if we want to see smallholder farmer as a prosperous, so then they need to have this extension advisory services and technology, the technical solution for their farm, and market services, market access to market. If they have these all the things in their hand, available in their hand, no one can stop them to be a prosper farmers. That is my learning. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting one. And of course, that comes from your own sort of drive to do better and your own eagerness. You talked about how when that opportunity came for you to attend a training, how excited and enthusiastic you are, right? So that's really an inspiring story. Now, Gayatri, the earlier video, I'm sure you saw that as well, with Jake driving this amazing combine harvester in Canada, right? That's for us here in Asia. I'm working here in Bangladesh. You're in India. That's like a rocket ship. We can't even imagine something like that here. But in the context of where we work, where you work in Bhopal, where I work in Bangladesh, what are some of the technologies that you've seen that can transform farmers' lives, especially smallholder farmers?
Interesting. Yeah. So technology. So as I already mentioned in my first questionnaire, you asked me that are my learnings. So technology based on the the farm size and where what type of tech. So technology based on the farm size and farmer, and I would recommend, I mean, also I support here the women friendly tools also, because we have seen that there is very few tools which is women friendly. Mostly they are heavy, and so women are unable to access. I mean, it's difficult for women to access that tools. So one is the women friendly tools, and the second one is based on the farm size, and like the small power tiller, and kind of irrigation tools and harvesting tools, which is very friendly, and also the weather information, to grab the weather information, so that farmer get to know, like, okay, so rain is going to happen, so let's harvest, or let's bait, or so that kind of technology, if that is available for the farmers, that would help to more and more farmers.
And you are in the forefront of making these technologies accessible, right? It's about
Yes.
right sizing technology, it's about designing appropriate technology, affordable technologies that work in the context to our farming system. So that's great. Now, the last question before we hand this over to you, Gayatri, is you have a double challenge. You're a farmer also, and also a woman in a context like South Asia. How do you handle this? What's the secret of your success? How do you balance your work, your life, being a food hero, being a role model for so many people in India? What's your success? What's your secret of your success?
My passion for the farming and for the farmers, and to make the farmers' life happy, healthy, and prosperous, and my dedication to help. So that is the that is the secret.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Gayatri. If we have further questions, I'm sure we'll get back to you.
Sure.
With that, I think we have to transition this over to a completely new context with Bettina and Theo, moving from North America to Asia and pinging this back over to wherever these folks are, maybe somewhere in Africa, that's what I heard. Over to you, Bettina.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a pleasure being with you today. My name is Bettina Prato. I am the senior coordinator of a network of about 50 institutions that work on access to finance for small and medium enterprises working in agriculture. I'm based in Rome at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. And I have to say, since we heard earlier on in the session about standing on the shoulders of our grandparents, that I also do come from a family of small mountain farmers in the north of Italy, particularly dairy farmers. So although my grandfather is no longer with us, I hope in some way he can listen to me and to the other colleagues, particularly to the farmers on this conversation today, and look fondly upon it. So I'm quite honored to be here today to introduce Theo de Jager, who is the president of the World Farmers Organization and also former president of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, as well as of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, PAFO. Theo is also chairman of the board of Agri All Africa, and also serves on the board of Agri Limpopo, where he's responsible for land reform, transformation, farmer development, and he's also been the Africa liaison since 2004. In addition, he is a farmer. He has farmed in South Africa since 1997 in the Lowveld region, with a particular focus on timber and subtropical fruits such as avocados, mangoes, macadamia nuts, and also raising goats. So Theo, I'm addressing you then today both as a farmer and as the leader of the World Farmers Organization. So I hope we can listen to you speak to both of your hats, let's say. Let us talk, if okay with you, particularly about the challenge of delivering decent and stable livelihoods for the many millions of men and women who produce our food in every country in the world, but particularly in the continent where you live and operate in Africa. So Theo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to take part in this deliberation today. You know, it's been a number of years since there are more people living in cities in the world than in the rural areas. And it's also true in my home country in South Africa. The big question is, does it matter? For us as farmers, of course it matters. There must be a rural alternative to city life. This is exactly why last year, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations launched its International Decade for Family Farmers, because family farming still is, across the globe, the heartbeat of rural economies. Family farmers are the reason why we have small towns, where there's a place of worship and there's an agricultural company, an input provider, and there's a school. Big farmers or corporate farmers, as we have them mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, they don't use the local bookkeeper or the local lawyer or the local agent for their inputs. But it's about more than that. It's about the value system. I've had the privilege to shake hands with farmers in 44 countries in Africa over the last 5 years. And I've been on all 6 continents on which we farm. And I really went to some trouble to ensure that I get to the smallest farms too, to see how people eke out a living from the soil. And no matter whether you've gone to Alaska or New Zealand, whether you've been to Argentina or Russia, whether you've been to Denmark or Kenya or South Africa, farmers are usually the more conservative part of society. And I don't mean conservative in political or religious terms. They are conservative because farming families still spend time together. They still eat together. They plan their day together. There's something more of a bond in a family that has been raised on a farm. And a farm remains in the memory of a family for a very long time. You can get rid of the farm, as you said yourself, but the farm does not let you go. We are all somehow connected to the soil. And if COVID did nothing else, it really raised some awareness about where our food comes from. And it's not shelves in shops. There's a massive value chain behind it. But then also, of the more than 820 million people who live below the breadline in the world, the largest part of them, ironically enough, are farmers. The biggest single challenge on our own continent in Africa is poverty and hunger, especially in the deep rural areas. But you know, there's only one way to kill the dragon of poverty and hunger, and that's through the creation of wealth. And the good news is that there is no sector of the economy of the world or of Africa that can create more wealth over a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than agriculture can. But then we must turn our farming enterprises in profitable businesses, sustainable and profitable, which means we need to do some things differently. And just as history presented these opportunities for some countries to really excel and leapfrog towards wealth, I sincerely believe, I really believe with every cell in my body, that digitalization of agriculture, the fourth industrial revolution, the fact that even a smallholder farmer in the farthest corner of Africa these days have access to mobile technology is the real game changer, because we can now reach there. We can communicate in 2 directions, and we can empower and link them to markets and introduce them to new technologies. This is the break Africa needed. What we now need, because Africa has everything that money cannot buy, the soils, the water, the climate, and the people. What we now need is the investment in the infrastructure and a firm belief in the economy of rural areas. And what we now need is policies, a policy environment that is conducive to competitive farming. We need now to change the hand-hoe in that farmer's hand to mobile technology, to mechanization and commercialization and modernization, because the world became very small for farmers. Every farmer is every day in competition with the best other farmers in the world. And we need to make our smallholders profitable and competitive. And by competitive, I mean the ability to put the preferred product in the hands of the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. This was really inspiring, and I like this very, sort of modern, positive, energetic vision of agriculture and all the opportunities that lie in the sector that you and the other speakers on this session have been presenting. I have a particular question to follow up on what you said about innovation and particularly digital technologies being a game changer, and then about turning farming into really profitable, vibrant enterprises. I would like to hear from you, from your own experience also as a farmer, as a partner, as an important value chain actor, so working in partnership with other actors in the value chain. What experiences can you bring to us, as examples of success, as examples of deployment, maybe of digital technologies as being really transformative, of partnerships that are market-oriented, that have been transformative in your experience with your own work in South Africa?
Well, one of my fondest memories is a project we have launched when I was still with Sakau. It was the handiwork of my colleague Ishmael Sunga, the CEO of Sakau, where we have launched an alternative input financing scheme. We piloted it, we tested it, because in a large part of Africa south of the Sahara, farmers do not own their own land. So they do not have collateral to back financing. And without financing, how would farmers produce? So in this area in Arusha, we organized our farmers in a small cooperative, and we went to a bank. We asked them for financing, and we said that the crop, which in this case was white maize, would serve as collateral. Now, no matter how you do your calculations, the best you can ever do if the crop itself is collateral is if you have proper crop insurance and you have an own contribution of at least 30 to 35%, which is exactly what the farmers did not have. But then we went to the input providers, one of the major seed companies, a fertilizer company, even the crop insurer himself, the mechanization and the diesel companies, and we asked them each to keep 5% of the invoice in the pool until we harvest our crops. So we would pay the last 5% on the invoice right at the end and not at the beginning. And the 6 times 5% gave us the 30% we needed. And also now the input providers shared in the risk. Usually the farmer would go to the bank on its own. He would carry all the risk. The input providers would pocket all their profit before he has even planted 1 cent. And if ever anything goes wrong, he would face the banker alone. And this thing went like clockwork. I really believe it is a model because we could measure progress digitally. Sensors are getting cheaper and cheaper every day. Every input provider was there on the farm digitally and could see what happens to the remaining 5%. It caused some teamwork digitally like I've never seen before. And I firmly believe that this can be rolled out literally from Cape Town to Cairo and from Madagascar to Morocco and bring the change we need in terms of access to financing.
Very exciting, and I personally find this really, really interesting, and I hope many others are listening to you as you describe this example. Before I hand over to Deepak for his closing remarks, I want to ask you, Theo, what is the main ask from the members of the World Farmers Organization to all the other players that are coming together around the Food Systems Summit? What is your collective main ask or expectation from the summit next year?
Well, first of all, we want to be part of the planning of the Food System Summit. There's no such a thing as a food system without farmers right in the center of it. And up to now, we were fortunate enough to be invited to the kitchen rather than to be invited to dinner. But it's a bit more than that. You know, if our food systems really worked, we wouldn't have had more than 800 million people hungry. If it really worked, we would have had a fairer distribution of risk and reward. If you look what a farmer gets for his product, and you compare that in any one of our major cities or bigger towns to what a consumer pay on the shelves, and then put that next to the amount of risk that accompanied this product, it is simply not fair. And we need to revamp this system as a whole. We must ensure that we start right at the bottom with healthier soils so that we have healthier products to bring healthier foods to healthier consumers. This is what the food system should be about.
Thank you. Excellent closing quote. So with that, thank you so much, Theo. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your story. I would then like to ask Deepak to please take the floor to wrap us up. Thank you.
Thank you, Bettina. Great, what an amazing session. It was really interesting to see Jake earlier in the day in his combine harvester in Canada, hear from the president of Farmers Organization and also a farmer himself, Theo, and speak to Gayatri in India, all within an hour. I mean, this is, what amazing times that we live in now. These videos and live streams from Canada, South Africa, and Asia clearly show that within the complex food system, with many interdependent and interrelated parts, farmers, whether large or small, are most crucial frontline workers in our fight against world hunger. They are the ones with the insight, the knowledge, and the know-how, and their lives and livelihoods depend upon each season's outcome, as we heard from them. And what did they tell us today? Well, we heard that farming is a learning journey. There's no certain outcomes. It's rapidly transforming with digital tools and innovation, and there is so much new things that are happening every day. We also learned that farmers are passionate about producing nutritious food and preserving our natural resources. They have every incentive to do so. And soil management, we heard, is the key success and the future of our success in reducing greenhouse gases and combating climate change, whether we're doing zero tillage or a system of rice intensification or any other technologies that you use. So therefore, the gist of today's session was we must prioritize listening to farmers' inputs, their opinions, and their voices, which are often marginalized if we are to begin the process of solving the global challenge of food insecurity and hunger. With that, our session has come to an end. I want to reiterate a statement from Theo earlier in the program that we are all somehow connected to the soil. On behalf of Farming First and food heroes like Jake, Gayatri, and Theo, I'd like to thank you for joining our session and hearing from our farmers around the world about how they are making food systems more sustainable, productive, and inclusive each and every day. For more on Farming First, please visit farmingfirst.org. That's farming, F-A-R-M-I-N-G, first, F-I-R-S-T.org. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of the program. Signing off.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touch touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Acción.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. we have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
No matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
Women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food.
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
we are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Acción.
Hola a todos, qué alegría estar hoy con ustedes en el Día Mundial de la Alimentación. Estamos acá con Joao Campari, líder mundial de sistemas alimentarios de la WWF, y yo soy Claudia Martínez, soy directora de la Coalición para la Alimentación y Uso del Suelo FOLU Colombia y también de las plataformas mundiales de países de FOLU Mundial. Estamos muy felices de estar con ustedes y queremos empezar esta hora maravillosa hablando de los sistemas alimentarios y la importancia de hacer estos sistemas alimentarios basados en la biodiversidad y basados en las dietas del planeta. Con eso quiero empezar. Joao, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, Claudia, qué gusto estar aquí y hablar de comida y alimentación en un día dedicado a la alimentación. Entonces es un gran placer estar aquí contigo y con todos.
Gracias, qué dicha. Oye, Joao, cuéntanos, ¿cuál es el estado del arte de la agrobiodiversidad mundial para la alimentación? Empecemos por contarle al público cómo ves esas cifras, cómo ves ese estado.
Claudia, es un estado bastante preocupante. Les voy a dar algunos números para empezarnos, ¿no? Fíjate que 95% de la ingesta calórica mundial proviene de 30 especies. Tenemos 30.000 plantas comestibles y cultivamos menos de 150. El 75% de los alimentos del mundo provienen solamente de 12 plantas y 5 especies de animales. Entonces, esto es lo que comemos hoy. Esto tiene un impacto muy grande para nuestra salud, ¿no? Y para la naturaleza. Por ejemplo, si tuviéramos más agrobiodiversidad para las personas y la naturaleza, si diversificáramos más nuestras fuentes de alimentos, ¿no? Podríamos tener sistemas productivos que serían más resistentes a plagas extremas, podríamos mejorar los servicios ecosistémicos que nosotros, ¿no? Que es bueno para la agricultura, la producción de alimentos, pero para nosotros también, y tener una diversidad de nutrición en los alimentos que contribuye a dietas más saludables.
Eso es fantástico. Realmente, mira, tú y yo que vivimos en países como Brasil y Colombia, países riquísimos en biodiversidad, esas cifras son alarmantes. Es decir, de más o menos una diversidad de 430.000 especies, estamos reduciéndonos a unas menos de 4 en una ingesta calórica del 60%, ¿sí? Que es muy poquito. Realmente tenemos que pensar en qué es esa biodiversidad y cómo nos la podemos comer. Ahora, ¿tú has visto, Joao, cómo los países ricos en biodiversidad pueden diversificar sus dietas?
Sí, sí, hay muchos ejemplos de diversificación de dietas. Yo creo que eso es un nuevo modelo de negocio, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué tenemos hoy, Claudia? Tenemos ahí aproximadamente 9 a 10% de la población mundial que sufre de hambre, ¿no? De hambre. Son más de 700 millones de personas. Y al paso que echamos en la basura una tercia parte de los alimentos producidos. Y entonces ese sistema de producir siempre más alimentos, hay mucho, los sistemas de monoculturas, por ejemplo, ¿no? Tenemos que pensar este business model, los negocios futuros, tenemos que diversificar. ¿Cómo vamos a hacer eso? Necesitamos de dietas más saludables, necesitamos ampliar la ingesta calórica de alimentos biodiversos, pero al mismo paso tenemos ahí un business model que nos da más de lo mismo. ¿Cómo cambiar todo eso? ¿No? Entonces yo creo que el problema, nadie tiene el monopolio del problema, ¿no? Es un problema sistémico que tenemos en un sistema alimentario global. Y yo también creo que nadie tiene el monopolio de la solución. Entonces tenemos siempre que traer o ir a todos para crear un modelo diferente, ¿no? Que diversifica nuestras fuentes calóricas y de ingestión de alimentos saludables y nutritivos.
Total, Joao. Mira, yo he pensado mucho en ese modelo, sobre todo en Colombia. Primero hemos transformado el uso del suelo de una manera dramática. Estamos utilizándolo totalmente para lo que no toca y estamos produciendo muy pocos alimentos. De hecho, pues no somos suficientes en un país que podríamos ser absolutamente autosuficientes en alimentación. Lo mismo pasaría como, me imagino, en Brasil, ¿no? Y yo creo que parte del tema empieza por las semillas. Yo no sé qué piensas tú. Hemos caído en un sistema legal en donde nos obligan a comprar unas semillas, las mismas, en donde hay toda una producción de semillas pues, basadas en unas solas empresas, y no podemos volver a los modos tradicionales en que guardábamos las semillas para poder producir un montón más de alimentos. De hecho, de América Latina salieron gran parte de los alimentos que se consumen en el planeta.
Sí, Claudia, estoy perfectamente de acuerdo contigo. Como te dije, es un business model que ahí hay semillas, pero hay también insumos, ¿no? Como las grandes empresas de fertilizantes, ¿no? De agroquímicos se van a repensar su modelo de negocio para la próxima generación, no solamente para la próxima, pero para la nuestra también. Estamos a 10 años de cumplir las metas de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. ¿Cómo vamos a hacer eso? ¿No? Necesitamos de las empresas de semillas, las empresas de insumos, productores. Necesitamos traer todas las voces para un ámbito común, para un ámbito único, para pensar cuál es la solución para todo eso, ¿no? No es de todo mal lo que los sistemas alimentarios están, lo traemos, los sistemas alimentarios actuales, ¿no? Con la agricultura y todo eso, hay mucha tecnología, mucha inversión y que trajo mucha gente fuera de la pobreza, pero sí necesitamos cambiar ese sistema de una forma más fundamental. Eso está
Absoluto,
puesto, ¿no?
yo creo que también tiene que ver con un cambio de paradigma y con un cambio cultural, ¿no? Porque si bien nuestros ancestros comían una dieta mucho más diversa y se basaban en la biodiversidad que quedaban alrededor de sus fincas, hoy en día nosotros nos estamos concentrando en comer lo que nos dicen que comamos. Y cambiar la cultura creo que es muy difícil, ¿no, Joao? Es decir, ¿cómo logramos que los chefs empiecen a hacer una diversidad de recetas basadas en plantas, en animales, en una diversificación de proteínas? ¿Cómo logramos que los colegios, por ejemplo, que los restaurantes en los colegios den una dieta mucho más variada para que los niños aprendan a comer mejor? Creo que hay una diversidad de formas que podemos empezar a pensar para diversificar las dietas. Primero, basado en sistemas agropecuarios regenerativos, en donde podamos realmente restaurar todo lo que hemos degradado, regenerar los sistemas productivos agroalimentarios y volver a pensar en producir mucho más, pero después pasar eso a todo un tema de cultura y de cambio de dietas. No sé qué piensas tú.
No, de nuevo, estoy totalmente de acuerdo contigo, Claudia, porque fíjate, tenemos hoy tecnología muy interesante, los principios de agroecología, por ejemplo, ¿no? Hay mucha cosa ahí, agroecología es una forma de compatibilizar sistemas productivos con respecto a la forma de producción, con respecto a los productores, es inclusivo, es saludable, ¿no? ¿Cómo hacer entender lo que es agroecología y cómo podemos traer los principios de agroecología para la escala, una escala mayor, ¿no? De la misma forma, hay muchos movimientos de la agricultura regenerativa, ¿no? Donde se busca fijar carbono en el suelo, ¿no? A través de biodiversidad en el suelo. Entonces, todo eso es muy importante. O sea, tenemos ahí en el mundo todo buenos ejemplos de cómo hacer eso, ¿no? Muchas veces el problema es de escala. ¿Cómo traer todo eso para una escala más amplia, para una escala global, ¿no? Para suplir la población mundial con los alimentos que va a ser necesario. Vamos a hacer ahí más de 10 millones de personas, pero de la misma forma que traemos esto para una base agroecológica, para una base sostenible, para una base regenerativa. No podemos más convertir a ecosistemas naturales para la producción de alimentos. Hay aproximadamente 2 billones de hectáreas de tierras que están subutilizadas o degradadas en el mundo. Es del tamaño de América del Sur prácticamente. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? ¿Cuánto de estas tierras podrían ser regeneradas para la producción sostenible de alimentos o regeneradas para proveer más servicios ecosistémicos? Entonces ahí tenemos que repensar todo el modelo de negocio, ¿no? De los sistemas alimentarios.
Absolutamente. Pues mira, nos podríamos quedar hablando acá, yo creo que horas, ¿no? Y realmente tenemos que transformar los sistemas alimentarios en potentes motores de desarrollo y equidad, utilizar nuestra biodiversidad y ver todos estos ejemplos maravillosos que pasan en el mundo. Hoy, en este día, queremos también mostrarles algunos ejemplos que están pasando en México y que están pasando en Colombia. Y por eso, el resto de esta hora vamos a invitarlos a que vean lo que está pasando. Primero, en directo, en la Caravana de la Alimentación, organizada por el Slow Food y Frito Latam, que son unas organizaciones que vienen organizando estas caravanas en Colombia para cambiar la cultura. Entonces, vamos a dar paso a eso. Y también vamos a empezar a ver, por ejemplo, cómo productores desde el Chocó usan las diferentes frutas para producir helados. Un ejemplo tan simple, ¿no, Joao? Y también pues vamos a ver más tarde algunos temas con recetarios y chefs en México. Así que por favor, estén con nosotros esta hora. Joao, muchas gracias por esta entrada. Creo que les hemos dado una información muy relevante para el tema de los sistemas alimentarios y pensar en la biodiversidad y en el planeta.
Gracias a usted, Claudia. Mucho gusto participar de esta charla. Hasta luego y buen día de la alimentación a todos.
Hi everyone, I kindly ask you to Claudia to just switch on her camera so to just introduce the session. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos. Entonces seguimos con la caravana por la alimentación. Querida Antonuela, bienvenida. Cuéntanos lo que estás haciendo.
Gracias a ustedes por la invitación a FOLU WWF. Estamos acá muy felices de participar. Hoy estamos haciendo un cocido boyacense. Yo tengo acá un platico muy lindo, no sé, creo que ahí lo ven, es con todos los ingredientes. Nosotros decidimos hacer este plato realmente porque representa toda la diversidad de los Andes colombianos y los ingredientes son como de la huerta del Pancoger y de las huertas campesinas. Entonces siempre estamos muy orgullosos de ellos y creemos que se merecen un espacio muy importante en Colombia, como en donde los puedan sembrar, donde se los puedan comer. Siempre estamos, como que siempre defendemos el cocido y cada vez que podemos compartir uno, lo compartimos. Yo les voy a contar, estos ingredientes son, este es guatila, que es una variedad de calabaza pequeñita. Hay muchas variedades de guatila, grandes, pequeñas, a unas les dicen blancas, negras. Esto es, papa criolla, esta es más grandecita, está más pequeña, cubios morados, cubios amarillos, chugua, auyama y mazorca. Y esto es hogado, que es como nuestra salsa en Colombia más importante para todos los estofados, caldos, sopas, para un montón de preparaciones que es tomate, cebolla y un poquito de cilantro. Entonces acá estamos entre todos. Hoy vamos a compartir este cocido casi con, creemos que entre 350, 400 porciones. Vamos a compartirlo en albergues de habitantes de la calle y de personas de la tercera edad. Vamos a ir a visitarlos porque siempre, usualmente, salimos con las ollas del cocido caliente y nos paramos, lo hemos hecho en la Plaza de Bolívar, en el Parque Lourdes, en el Parque de los Hippies, pero este año no pudimos por la circunstancia del COVID, pero los vamos a tener todos empacados y los vamos a llevar directamente a los albergues. Entonces yo quiero que ustedes vean, ya por aquí tenemos unos empacados, ya estamos acá empacando con todos los amigos de la Alianza de Cocineros. Ya casi vamos a terminar nuestra primera olla que está por acá, que es una olla pues gigante. Ya aquí se le está viendo el fondo y tenemos otra olla de este mismo tamaño lista para seguir empacando. Yo quiero como presentarles a Leo. Nosotros nos unimos con Frito este año para hacer este cocido.
¿Cómo están? Buenas tardes, días, no sé qué hora es. Estamos muy contentos de poder llevarle a la gente en este Día de la Alimentación un pedacito de los Andes, de nosotros, de nuestra tierra, y así rescatar también la labor del campesino, del agricultor, que realmente lo hace con mucho amor y nosotros tenemos que valorar eso. Entonces, siento que haciendo este plato vamos a ayudar a tener ese sentido de pertenencia y ese amor por el producto limpio y pues con el derecho de la alimentación que todos tendríamos que tener. Sigo acá.
Sí, yo ahora vamos a don Eduardo, pero también quiero contarles un poquito Slow Food y la Alianza de Cocineros, que es un grupo de cocineros que nos hemos dedicado a eso, promover el alimento bueno, limpio y justo, que es como los 3 valores que promueve Slow Food. Trabajamos juntos desde hace ya varios años. Y realmente hemos tratado siempre como de promover cada uno de estos valores, siempre cocinando y ofreciendo como distintas cosas. El cocido, como ya dije, principalmente, pero también ofrecemos como cacao colombiano, amasijos, otro tipo de cosas, porque sí creemos que así también protegemos la biodiversidad. Colombia, bueno, como todo, creo que todo, ¿no? Suramérica es riquísimo, como que la biodiversidad es increíble, entonces sí promover siempre eso a través del alimento para nosotros ha sido como vital y prioritario. Entonces les quiero también presentar a Eduardo, que está por aquí, para que él también les cuente un poquito del cocido de los Andes.
Hola, bueno, estamos aquí, ya terminamos nuestra primera olla de cocido. Nos emociona un montón como este plato y este ejercicio, porque creo que cuando a Nela se le ocurrió esta idea de ofrecer comida en la calle, creo que fue el alimento en su justa medida y en su justo puesto. ¿Sí? Y creo que lo que dice es que el alimento es para todos. Todo el poder que tiene como el alimento, características, como en su relación con el productor, en su relación con que realmente el alimento debe ser un derecho, ¿sí? No como un lujo, sino un derecho. Entonces a nosotros siempre como este ejercicio nos parece como de gran poder simbólico cada vez que lo hacemos.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias por la invitación de nuevo. Estamos muy felices de haberlos acompañado y creo que va a ser muy lindo esta tarde cuando entreguemos todos estos almuerzos. Yo creo que después quizá les podamos compartir fotos o el resto de lo que pase en nuestra tarde, pero de nuevo, sí, siempre que puedan, compartan y promuevan el alimento bueno, limpio y justo para todos. Chao. Chao, chicos.
Gracias, Antonuela. Qué bueno, qué maravilla. Qué afortunados todos los que pueden saborear este delicioso plato y todos los de la caravana que hoy reciben sus alimentos con todas estas especies criollas, con este sabor colombiano, con esta delicia. Ahora quiero pasar a un evento lindo y es a presentarles a Johanna Rincón y Alvinson Castro, fundadores de un fabuloso emprendimiento chocuano llamado Nativos, que incorpora los frutos de la selva del Pacífico colombiano en deliciosos helados artesanales. Borojó, chontaduro, badea, ¿quién ha conocido esos sabores en el mundo? Saboréenlos. Frutos muy poco conocidos, con muchas propiedades alimenticias y de salud, y muy fundamentalmente que vienen de esta selva chocoana absolutamente biodiversa. Entonces invitamos a Johanna y a Alvinson a que nos cuenten la importancia de resaltar los sabores de esas especies nativos. Bienvenidos. A ver si la conectividad en el Chocó está buena. Nativos, gracias. Hola, amigos.
Hola, buenos días. Que lleva la alimentación desde el corazón de la selva fluvial, uno de los sitios que más llueve en el mundo y uno de los más biodiversos. Les mandamos un gran saludo desde Nativos. Pues les voy a contar un poquito qué es Nativos a todos. Ya tú hiciste una antesala. Nativos es un emprendimiento heladería que se hizo realidad porque buscamos una manera de diversidad que hay del Chocó. ¿Y cómo le dimos valor agregado? A través de utilizando esa biodiversidad de las frutas, tanto silvestres como cultivadas que hay en esta región tan biodiversa. Y también aprovechar todos esos conocimientos ancestrales incorporándolo al helado, como son algunas frutas, como el caso del milpesos, que su contenido nutritivo, como el de la leche materna, que aporta muchos nutrientes. Entonces, en el marco de todo este evento, de la alimentación, toda esta biodiversidad que cada vez nos dice que tenemos que buscar cosas nuevas, cosas saludables, cosas orgánicas, eso es Nativos.
Bueno, hola, queremos contarles que nosotros apostamos a hacer helados, a hacer productos con estas frutas desconocidas de la biodiversidad chocuana. Y en un principio fue un poco complejo, porque a pesar de que tenemos una gran diversidad, como siempre se dice en la literatura, y siempre que se habla del Chocó es un lugar muy biodiverso, entonces tenemos, no sé, 10, 15, 20 tipos de frutas endémicos o frutas incorporados aquí en esta región, que inicialmente solamente eran consumidos en los hogares, entonces eran como muy desconocidos y solo en algunos hogares porque la oferta de estas frutas o los cultivos de estas frutas eran muy incipientes, entonces no todas las personas tenían acceso a estas maravillosas frutas. Entonces cuando nosotros soñamos o decidimos queremos incentivar el uso y el conocimiento de estas, empezamos por conocer quiénes eran los que los cultivaban inicialmente y había unos cuantos cultivadores a las afueras de Quibdó. Entonces decidimos hablar con ellos, contarles nuestro sueño, nuestro proyecto, hacer una alianza con ellos y decidieron creer en nosotros. Entonces decidieron empezar a sembrar y a sembrar cada vez más, a contarle al vecino y eso hizo que la oferta de estas frutas fuera cada vez mayor y que ahora el acceso a estos superfrutas, a estos superalimentos sea para todos, que no sea solamente como antes unos cuantos y no solamente en el consumo del hogar, sino que con estas frutas a partir de nativos también han surgido otros emprendimientos, ahora tenemos cervezas también con estas frutas, tenemos postres, tenemos deshidratados y nuestro sueño es que todos en el país y en el mundo nos conozcan a través de estos sabores maravillosos. Todas las frutas tienen una cantidad de vitaminas, una cantidad de componentes nutricionales muy importantes, pero en especial estas frutas que tenemos acá, sobre todo, por ejemplo, esta que se ve bien, la que le hablaba a mi esposo, el nombre vulgar o nombre común, 1000 pesos, trufa o ceje, y su nombre científico Onocarpus bataúa. Ese es un ejemplo del potencial que tienen estas frutas. ¿Por qué? Porque esta fruta ha sido tradicionalmente utilizada por las comunidades indígenas y afro en su alimentación. Y estudios científicos han comprobado que tiene una cantidad de componentes nutricionales maravillosos. Como decía mi esposo, incluso lo han comparado con la leche materna. Entonces nosotros soñamos con que todos tengan acceso a este tipo de frutas, a este tipo de nutrientes. Y a través de eso, jalonar la conservación de ellas, que si lo utilizamos y le damos valor, entonces así mismo se le va a dar un cuidado, ¿cierto? Y se va a mantener en el tiempo. Entonces soñamos como que estas frutas sean las embajadoras del Chocó y que a través de nuestro helado y otros productos que queremos desarrollar, Colombia y el mundo entero conozca el Chocó, conozca esta región tan rica. Y no solamente rica en biodiversidad, sino que rica en talento, rica en recursos humanos y rica en oportunidades. Queremos eso, convertirnos, que estas frutas se conviertan en las embajadoras del Chocó en el mundo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, equipo nativos, qué maravilla. Cuéntenos un poco, a ver, acá, ¿qué le dan a ese niño tan maravilloso? ¿Y cuáles son las propiedades de estas frutas para que este niño se alimente bien? Cuéntenos de qué es el tetero de este hijo maravilloso.
Este hijo consume helado y consume helado con tranquilidad, porque convencionalmente el helado no es un producto muy nutritivo, ¿cierto? Pero el helado que hacemos en nativos es un helado súper nutritivo. Siempre hemos tenido como ese enfoque, que además de que tenga esas propiedades que le otorgan las frutas, también es a base de yogur, un yogur artesanal que nosotros elaboramos, no tiene nada de grasa adicionada, es bajo en azúcar, no tiene ningún químico, conservante ni aditivo. Entonces este niño y otros niños del Chocó tienen la oportunidad de nutrirse con un delicioso helado con las frutas de su región.
Pues qué afortunados, se imaginan los niños del mundo que pudieron nutrirse con estas frutas que, como bien dicen, se convierten en las embajadoras. Qué maravilla que las frutas sean embajadoras. Apruebo esa moción. De ahora en adelante, estas frutas maravillosas y endémicas del Pacífico colombiano, del Chocó biográfico, son las embajadoras de la nutrición del mundo. Muchas gracias a ustedes. Y un caluroso abrazo. Se les aprecia, gracias.
Saludos, feliz día de alimentación.
Gracias. Bueno, siguiendo con este maravilloso evento, ahora vamos a escuchar a Ricardo Muñoz y a Valeria Hinojosa. Ricardo es mexicano, chef de talla mundial y apasionado por la cocina tradicional y ancestral mexicana. Valeria es boliviana, activista ambiental, influenciadora 2020 y fundadora de GAFF Foundation. Y hoy ambos nos van a hablar sobre la importancia de la biodiversidad en la gastronomía y en el rescate de las variedades criollas y nativas. Creo que van a cocinar unos chilis, así que la sorpresa se la dejo a ellos para que por favor nos cuenten qué van a hacer. Valeria, mucho gusto. Un abrazo, Ricardo. Desde
Hola.
Colombia, adelante.
Muchísimas gracias por la introducción y por tenernos aquí con ustedes. Hola Ricardo, finalmente te Hola, veo. ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás?
Pues,
Ayer tuvimos una llamadita para ponernos al día, pero qué lindo poder verte por la cámara. Como les comentaba Claudia, a todos los que nos están viendo desde casa, este es un tema que de verdad a mí me apasiona mucho y a Ricardo también, todo lo que es la alimentación. Para los que no saben un poco de mi historia, yo me volví vegetariana y luego vegana, ya voy 10 años comiendo plant-based, pero un poquito más allá del tema de salud, que también vamos a hablar un poco de eso, entendí el impacto de mi dieta cuando se viene al cambio climático, a la biodiversidad de los alimentos, que Ricardo va a hablar un poco sobre esto, y sobre cómo podemos reducir el impacto de futuras pandemias, conservar el agua, preservar la naturaleza y también apoyarnos entre todos y apoyar nuestra salud. Entonces, hoy estamos aquí para hablar esos temas con ustedes. Ricardo, mil gracias por hacer esto con nosotros. Cuéntanos un poquitito sobre ti, sobre lo que has hecho. Estuve leyendo lo que haces y de verdad que es algo muy admirable cómo estás preservando la cultura mexicana a través de los alimentos. Bueno, rapidísimamente, yo tengo 34 años constantes y activos de viajar por todo el país, recopilando toda esta información para la preservación de las tradiciones culinarias de México. Lo que nunca me imaginé fue el impacto que 30 años después íbamos a tener y esta plática, porque algo que tiene que ver y que yo quisiera ser muy puntual en esto, es que la forma de alimentarnos modifica el medio ambiente. México, hasta hace unos cuantos tiempo, éramos el cuarto país en biodiversidad, aunque las listas cambian según a quien le preguntes, pero hoy estamos en quinto y hemos perdido un lugar, pero no se trata de un concurso, sino de que eso te habla de la pérdida que hay. Y con esta alimentación basada todo en proteína animal, que fue como nos enseñaron en los 80s, hay datos que son muy duros. Mira, por ejemplo, el 27% de los gases que se emiten en el mundo son, para que del efecto invernadero, lo produce la alimentación. O sea, esto es una cosa que hay que tomar con mucha cautela, son datos durísimos. Y luego, somos también responsables del uso, de la extracción o utilización del 70% del agua en el mundo, ¿no? Somos el principal impulsor de la pérdida de la biodiversidad, y esto tiene que ver con el monocultivo, que es algo que no está bueno, y por el otro lado, ¿cómo llegamos a estas contaminaciones? Pues, por ejemplo, la res, o lo que conocemos la vaca, ese animalito, según entiendo, le tenemos que dar 7 kilos de alimento para producir tan solo 1 kilo de carne, y emite gases y hace un desorden y estamos acabando. Entonces, y la otra gran cosa que es muy triste es que en los 70, 60 nos dijeron que la carne de la res era como la panacea de la alimentación y que todo el mundo tenía que consumir, y ahora estamos descubriendo que no es así, que es todo lo contrario, que deberíamos de comer muy poquitito. No, y sabes qué lindo escuchar un chef hablar de esta manera con una mente un poco más abierta y un corazón también más abierto a el impacto que tiene nuestra dieta, porque creo que eso es lo que el mundo nos cuesta un poco entender. No creo que no asociamos o no conectamos con lo que está pasando mundialmente con el cambio climático y todo lo que ponemos en nuestro plato. Entonces, de verdad, gracias por compartir eso con nosotros. También me imagino que esta pandemia ha abierto la mente a todas las personas que están viendo esto en casa, como te la abrió a ti después de lo que hablamos de ayer, que me estabas contando un poco personal, los cambios que estás haciendo en la vida. Entonces, no sé si quieres compartir también con todos cómo personalmente y también como chef estás viendo que el mundo está cambiando de una manera más positiva y estamos empezando a enfocarnos en proteger lo que nos queda, ¿no? En darnos cuenta de los desperdicios que producimos a diario de comida. Algo que tú estabas mencionando tan importante eran las emisiones de CO2. También, para los que están viendo esto en casa, si no compostamos, que yo sé que a veces es una idea tan loca la composta, nosotros empezamos una en casa hace poco,
se emiten gases de metano en los vertederos. Y estos son muchísimo más fuertes, si no me equivoco, son 84 veces más fuertes que los gases de CO2, las emisiones de CO2. Entonces, todo tiene un impacto y es esa conexión que tenemos que hacer como consumidores, hasta con cosas tan básicas como lo que comemos. Entonces, cuéntame un poquitito a ver qué has visto tú en esta pandemia, qué es lo que está cambiando personalmente, así ábrete con nosotros y como chef
Sí.
también me encantaría saber tu experiencia.
Bueno, nada más quiero decirte que de escucharte prometo hacer mi propia composta, porque no la he hecho, pero voy a hacerla, lo prometo. Bueno, mira, yo he cambiado mucho mi alimentación. La gente que me conoce, yo llegué a pesar 118 kilos, ahora estoy en 85. Y esto, a ver, no es que ser vegano o vegetariano te adelgace del todo, pero sí que ayuda porque ayudamos al cuerpo a digerir mejores cosas, lo estamos intoxicando todo el tiempo, hay alimentos transgresores que nos enferman y eso la gente no lo sabe. Entonces, bueno, yo no soy vegetariano ni vegano, pero sí ya tengo como unos 75-80% de esta tendencia, porque una de las cosas que yo descubrí, que el efecto es casi inmediato, es que cuando dejas de comer tanta carne roja, por ejemplo, te sientes más liviano, te sientes más energético, no te da tanto sueño. Entonces digo, esto lo estoy llevando a la mesa así como de una forma vivencial para que la gente entienda de lo que se trata, ¿no? Y luego la otra cosa es que ha bajado el colesterol, ya no soy resistente a la insulina, ya no tengo hígado graso. A ver, son un montón de enfermedades, nada más por el cambio alimenticio, ¿no? Entonces, sí es importante modificar la dieta. Lamentablemente, yo, por lo menos en México y yo diría casi toda Latinoamérica, yo les doy el crédito de la duda porque cuando yo crecí, nos dijeron, y no necesariamente mi papá, era todo lo que nos bombardeaba con la información que salía en radio, televisión y todo, y siempre nos hicieron creer que la carne y la carne y la carne y la carne. Y es importante entrar en esta valoración, ¿no? No le estamos pidiendo a nadie que se vuelva vegano o vegetariano, que no estaría mal, pero lo que sí es que estamos comiendo muchísima carne, ¿no? Se supone que necesitaríamos como 100 gramos de proteína casi a la semana, y bueno, 100 gramos de esa proteína a veces nos las metemos en unos tacos o en unos huevos revueltos en el desayuno. Entonces, el cuerpo cobra, ¿no? Cobra la situación, ¿no? Y la otra cosa, regresando a nuestro tema que estábamos hablando, pues estamos perdiendo muchísima biodiversidad. Fíjate tú que hay un asunto de 820 millones de personas en el mundo que pasan hambre o viven amenazadas con pasar hambre. Esto quiere decir que no están seguros que van a poder tener algo que comer en el día a día. Esto es terrible. Y por el otro lado, los de la industria de la alimentación, una vez que el alimento está producido, esto es escandaloso. O sea, es que a veces hay que decir las cosas más claras, ¿no? A ver, pasamos una penuria para producir verduras, frutas y etcétera, ¿no? Pero, ok, ya las tenemos, ya las producimos, pues se pierde el 30%, por lo menos el 30% de lo que producimos se va a la basura. Es una cosa escandalosa.
Eso es algo que creo que a mí me afectó mucho entenderlo, sobre todo aquí en Estados Unidos, yo vivo en Miami, de ver el consumo que tenemos y cómo las compañías prácticamente guían nuestro consumo y nos hemos vuelto robots. O sea, uno va al supermercado, mete todo en el carro, no sabe lo que está metiendo, no lee etiquetas, no sabe de dónde viene y sobre todo creo que la importancia de que las cosas no tengan pesticidas nocivos, que sean cosas orgánicas, porque también no solo para nuestra salud, sino también cómo eso está impactando la tierra, el agua, la naturaleza, las comunidades, la pobreza, el hambre que la gente está pasando hoy en día. Entonces, esas son cosas, como tú decías, que creo que es tan importante recalcar. Yo no creo que la humanidad sea mala, simplemente no estamos informados. Nos han educado diferente Y para mí ha sido eso, hacer nuestra propia investigación y empezar a leer más y empezar a hacer las preguntas correctas, ¿no? Sobre todo cuando se viene algo como la alimentación.
Oye, y hablando de esta biodiversidad que tiene Colombia, que tiene México, que tiene muchísimos países de Latinoamérica, tú mencionaste algo que es muy importante cuando van al supermercado, porque hay un catálogo de frutas y de verduras ganadoras, que son las que siempre aparecen, pero esto está matando la biodiversidad, porque resulta ser que hay un tipo de mango que todo el mundo quiere, pero hay otros 30 tipos de mango, y en México tenemos eso. Los supermercados no están muy interesados en traer estos frutos y verduras locales. Entonces, ¿cómo se contrarresta esto? Pues cada vez que vayan al supermercado le dicen, me falta caimito, que es una fruta, ¿no? Y me falta zapote domingo, que es otra fruta. Pues me falta el oreganón, pues me falta esto. Y hay que empezar a reclamar por esos ingredientes porque los supermercados son cadenas alimenticias que solamente les interesa vender lo que todo el mundo compra. Y otra cosa importante, ¿qué ridiculez es esa de que todas las calabacitas y que todas las manzanas tienen que ser del mismo tamaño y del mismo color? Oye, tenemos que hacer una campaña mundial de eso, no puede ser. La naturaleza da chiquito, grande, mediano, eso debería estar prohibido. No puede ser, porque resulta que hay aguacatitos o así que no crecen, que son deliciosos, que tienen lo mismo y todo, y nada más no llegan a los mercados y nada más no los venden porque no alcanzaron el tamaño. Pero este ejemplo que estoy poniendo es una bagatela comparado con los miles de alimentos, ¿no? Déjame te muestro, nada más tengo 2 ejemplos. Mira,
sí, muéstrame porque
esto es rapidísimo y no voy a ahondar. Mira, nada más los chiles chipotles que son tan vanagloriados en México, la gente piensa que hay uno, pero el chipotle que tengo en medio es el que todo el mundo conoce, ¿ok? Pero todos sus demás hermanos son ignorados y muchos de estos que están aquí están en serios, pero en serios peligros de extinción. ¿Y por qué? Porque la gente nada más conoce una variedad de chipotle, esa es la que se comercializa y todos los demás están fuera. Nada más los leo rápido: el chile rallado ahumado de Pocantla, el chile chipotle tamarindo, el chile mije oaxaqueño, el chile seco ahumado del Estado de México, el chile seco de Huautla, el chile mora de San Luis, el chile chipotle Navidad, y tenemos el chile meco de Oaxaca, y faltaron. Y vamos rapidísimo a la otra, que así te la leo también, para que veas. Mira, este es un chile muy interesante que yo personalmente digo, no me gusta hablar mucho de eso, pero yo he metido mano, dinero, tiempo y esfuerzo en este chile para salvaguardar, porque es una familia que se llama chilhuacle, y lo hay negro, rojo y amarillo. Del lado izquierdo están en frescos y del lado derecho están en secos. Pero fíjate, nadie que viva fuera del área de la Cañada en Oaxaca ha podido tener la delicia de comer este chile en fresco, porque nada más no se...
Creo que nos pasaste, a mí me sale el mismo slide, creo que hay que ir al otro.
A ver, los chiles, ahorita te los paso. Bueno, mientras sigo, ¿ahí lo ves ya?
No sé si soy yo, pero bueno, lo puedo ver chiquitito, lo veo aquí a la izquierda, así que está bien.
Bueno, ojalá que todo el mundo lo esté viendo. Entonces, nadie ha podido comer los frescos. Y del lado derecho es súper escasísimo, pero te platico rapidísimo qué es lo que pasa con esto. Estos chiles son los responsables de los colores de los moles en Oaxaca. El amarillo se ocupa para el mole amarillo, el rojo se ocupa para el coloradito, colorado, manchamanteles. Y el negro se ocupa para el mole negro y el chichilo negro. Pero estos chiles, como están desapareciendo, todavía hace un par de años del amarillo nada más se cultivaba media hectárea para todo el país. Y uno de rojo y uno de negro. Afortunadamente hemos mejorado esto, pero sin estos chiles no hay los colores de los moles. Entonces, cuando yo llegué a Oaxaca hace mucho tiempo, me hablaban de un mole amarillo que se veía rojo, porque ya lo estaban haciendo con otro chile. Entonces, ahí se modifican los cambios, no estamos ayudando a los agricultores, y de ahí que yo estoy haciendo una enciclopedia que ya pronto tendrá 50 volúmenes, donde vamos a dar a conocer la utilización de todos estos productos, porque el problema es que la gente va a los mercados, los ve y dicen, oiga, ¿esos chiles cuáles son? Oiga, ¿y eso cómo se usa? Y esa es una cadena que tenemos que romper. Regreso contigo.
Sí, eso es algo, creo que es un problema mundialmente que estamos viviendo, y voy a recalcar algo que dijiste que es tan importante. Cuando ustedes van al supermercado, todos los que nos están viendo en casa, de verdad que tienen un poder y una responsabilidad muy grande como consumidores, y eso es lo que tenemos que conectar. Cuando ustedes compran, como decía Ricardo, la fruta más que esté brillando, que sea perfecta, que no tenga una rayita, todas las frutas que tienen un morete o una rayita han sido botadas, o sea, no les dan la atención que les deberían dar, no les dan la oportunidad de venderse en los supermercados grandes. Entonces, y eso también lo hablamos contigo ayer, la importancia de apoyar a los agricultores locales. En muchos países, sé que esto lo puede hacer uno yendo a un farmer's market aquí en Estados Unidos, muchas compañías que me encantan han sacado cajas que te mandan todas las verduras y las frutas que los supermercados rechazan porque tienen una rayita, porque no están perfectos, porque el tamaño es desigual, y te lo mandan a la casa. Entonces, estos son vegetales y frutas orgánicas rechazadas de cadenas grandes que les están dando una segunda vida, y todo es comestible. Entonces, ahí es donde nosotros podemos ver el poder que tenemos realmente en nuestra dieta como consumidores para empezar a crear un cambio positivo en el mundo, para proteger la naturaleza, para dar trabajo y sobre todo para preservar la biodiversidad de los alimentos. Y bueno.
Oye,
una
pues nada,
última
para no
pregunta que te voy a
despedirnos
decir, porque
con
creo
una
que nos
mala
queda
noticia.
un minuto, nos
Para
quedamos
no despedirnos con una mala noticia, por lo menos ya tenemos la Conavio en México, que se ha encargado de registrar todos estos frutos, y tenemos un asunto de Dale Chamba con la WWF, y tenemos una suficiencia alimentaria, y también tenemos el sistema de la milpa para evitar el monocultivo. Así que hay algunas cosas que se están haciendo. Falta mucho por hacer. Pero
vas a empezar tu composta,
Sí,
esa es una buena noticia también.
Sí, muy bien,
Bueno,
pues ya está aquí nuestra anfitriona.
Sí, tenemos que ir terminando esto, pero gracias a todos los que están en casa, gracias a ti, Ricardo,
después nosotros vamos a tomar café aparte.
Sí, por favor.
Yo me quedé antojada, Ricardo y Valeria. Yo necesito probar todas esas deliciosas comidas que preparas con estos chiles. Y ese último que hablaste me pareció como que me hacía boca el agua.
Sí, es un chile muy sabroso.
No,
cuando vayamos
delicia,
a visitar
qué
a
delicia.
México, nos haces unos platitos.
Bueno,
exacto,
sí, claro.
Por favor, invítanos, Ricardo.
Vengan a México, vengan a Oaxaca, vengan a México, acá los esperamos.
Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, pues gracias Valeria, y gracias Ricardo.
Gracias a ustedes.
Un abrazo gigante y grandísimo a México, nuestro país hermano y amigo, por esa grandiosa biodiversidad, además por esa maravillosa culinaria que tiene este país, que es absolutamente única. Bueno, para cerrar, quiero primero darles las gracias porque es que, como verán, vimos todas estas experiencias desde el Chocó colombiano, desde esta caravana de la alimentación. Estamos en México oyendo de estas maravillosas iniciativas que se están haciendo desde un chef famoso, y ahorita pasamos a Juan Lucas Restrepo, director de CIAT y Biodiversity. Juan Lucas, bienvenido. Y además, embajador FOLU. Así que, Juan Lucas, desde Roma, pero como si estuvieras en Colombia, te doy la bienvenida. Un abrazo gigante. ¿Cómo estás?
Hola, querida Claudia. Muy contento de verte. Feliz Día Mundial de la Alimentación. Y por supuesto, llevo en esta sesión haciendo hambre con todas estas delicias de platos basados con ingredientes locales sobre los que escuchamos hoy.
Qué maravilla, ¿no? O sea, tú divides biodiversity, pero es que yo creo que biodiversity entra por la barriga, ¿no? La biodiversidad en la olla, y eso es lo que oímos hoy. Entonces, cuéntanos un poco cómo te pareció este mundo de sabores, este mundo de olores, que casi lo sentimos en toda tu experiencia y lo que estás haciendo desde Biodiversity y CIAT.
Pues mira, Claudia, yo creo que lo que escuchamos hoy muestra una tendencia que está cogiendo mucha fuerza, que es tremendamente importante, y yo no me imagino hace 10 años un Día Mundial de la Alimentación con este tipo de diálogo, no solo el que estamos teniendo en esta sesión, sino en este rally de 24 horas donde ya estamos preocupados no solo por resolver los temas de hambre, sino por alimentar bien a la sociedad y lograr hacerlo en armonía con el ambiente, teniendo obviamente cuidado con los temas de salud, etcétera. Entonces, hoy fue muy bonito, hoy fue muy interesante porque escuchamos sobre esas enormes oportunidades desde lo local de transformar los sistemas alimentarios. No tiene que ser de arriba abajo con esas recetas globales, sino que es de abajo hacia arriba. Y yo, por supuesto, como tú también, quedé súper antojado de un cocido boyacense que no se consigue por acá, con un helado de 1.000 pesos, que ojalá lo exporten pronto, o de un mole negro con chiles locales de Oaxaca, como también escuchamos por parte de Ricardo.
Sí, yo también. Además, cada uno de estos emprendimientos, cada uno de estos chefs famosos que están convirtiendo realmente la biodiversidad en algo real, en pensar desde dónde se produce, ¿no? Y yo creo que ahí, Juan Lucas, tú nos puedes decir mucho, porque yo hablaba al principio de esta charla de la importancia de las semillas y hablaba pues que la diversidad solo se puede dar si tenemos una variedad de semillas. Si tú tienes ese emporio de CECIAT que estás creando, cuéntanos un poco sobre las semillas y la biodiversidad.
Bueno, pero entonces, para no repetir, yo creo que vale la pena recordar lo que hablaba Joao de toda esa homogenización de las dietas mundiales. Yo creo que eso es algo que es importante capturar en esta discusión. Dietas que son más homogéneas, menos nutritivas, menos agrobiodiversas y que tienen unos impactos muy negativos en el paisaje, en el medio ambiente y al final del día, pues finalmente para la sociedad como un todo. Si queremos devolvernos hasta donde podamos y rescatar esa agrobiodiversidad y yendo a lo que me preguntas, por supuesto, el eje de todo esto, como lo veíamos con Ricardo, como lo escuchamos con la experiencia de Chocó, donde nos hablaban cómo es de difícil encontrar nuevamente esos ingredientes que queremos volver a valorizar. Y desafortunadamente hoy hemos perdido frente a hace 100 años más o menos un 90% de la diversidad agrícola con la que contábamos en ese entonces. Entonces, hoy ¿en qué andamos? Ha habido un esfuerzo muy importante, muy loable de centros internacionales como el que yo oriento, de armar esas colecciones globales que están bajo los auspicios de la FAO y que hoy representan en muy buena medida buena parte de esa agrobiodiversidad que ya se logró conservar. Los países han hecho también con sus sistemas nacionales un trabajo enorme, pero nos dedicábamos más a pensar en proteger y en conservar y poco en reconectarnos nuevamente con las comunidades, a través de los sistemas de disposición, digamos, de disponibilidad de semillas, para que efectivamente toda esa agrobiodiversidad que se ha logrado conservar, pues se convierta en algo que esté en las comunidades, que también han sido sus custodios por muchos años y que permitan desarrollar cadenas de valor como las que escuchamos hoy en estos pocos ejemplos.
Total, absolutamente. Yo creo que, digamos, si uno además valorara, yo me acuerdo hace unos años el Instituto Smithsonian hizo una publicación que se llamaba Seeds for Change, las semillas del cambio, ¿sí? Yo creo que el cambio está en cada uno de nosotros, pero también el cambio está en reevaluar, digamos, los sistemas tradicionales de alimentación, en reevaluar lo que nos dieron, como bien decías, de dónde venimos y cómo recomponer, restaurar, regenerar todos estos sistemas alimentarios para volverlos otra vez fruto de nuestra nutrición, de nuestra salud, de nuestro bienestar. Así que estoy totalmente contigo. Muchas gracias, Juan Lucas. Yo nos quedan, digamos, un minuto. Quiero que les dejes un mensaje a todos en este minuto, Juan Lucas.
Bueno, un mensaje corto. Yo creo que tenemos que ser muy cuidadosos de no ser dogmáticos. La alimentación del mundo es interdependiente. Prácticamente ninguna comunidad a futuro va a poder depender exclusivamente de lo originario en sus regiones. Debería valorizar lo originario, pero entender que la pizza en Italia tiene tomates de América y que en América consumimos arroz que viene de Asia, y todo esto de interdependencia es muy importante. Y también ser dogmáticos en la medida en que no se trata de solo consumir vegetales, sino consumir proteína animal. Hay incluso poblaciones que requieren subir, muy pobres, que requieren tener la oportunidad de acceso a proteína animal, pero que tenemos que rebalancear y encaminarnos en rutas que sean viables. Hay 1.600 millones de personas que no pueden acceder a una dieta saludable, así lo quisieran. Entonces tenemos que ser cuidadosos para que esa gran transición en la transformación de los sistemas alimentarios las hagamos con el cuidado de la equidad social, la justicia social, y tener obviamente en nuestras mentes siempre las poblaciones más pobres, tanto urbanas como rurales.
Muchas gracias, Juan Lucas. Un abrazo, como siempre. Gracias.
Quiero acabar, Claudia, me encanta verte.
Dejándolos con... Gracias, Juan Lucas, y gracias de verdad a todos los que han participado en esta hora. Vamos a cerrar con un video de Ricardo Muñoz, que nos va a dejar con ganas de irnos a los que estamos en este horario del mundo a almorzar con ese delicioso plato. Con eso me despido y les agradezco a todos. Un abrazo a todos.
Hola, yo soy el chef Ricardo Muñoz Zurita. Vamos a tratar de darle chamba, o vamos a tener que ocupar dos productos que son hermanos de dos grandes familias que pertenecen a unos frutos que, por cierto, son nativos de Mesoamérica, de nuestras tierras. Han caído en el desuso. Pudiera parecer increíble, pero así es. Y uno es un chile, una variedad de chile que le pertenece a una región que cultivan nuestros hermanos mijes en Oaxaca, y hay otro enigmático y muy antiguo que es como el abuelo o el ancestro de todos los jitomates o tomates rojos que conocemos hoy, que es el tomate riñón. Y ahora les voy a enseñar cómo hacer una salsa muy elegante, muy fina. Tengo aquí ya cocido el tomate riñón, ya tostado e hidratado, vean. Nada más lo puse en agua, no hice nada. El chile pasilla, asado y pelado mis ajitos, sal y una taza de agua. Se meten todos los ingredientes, chile pasilla, tomate, riñón. Siempre que vamos a licuar, empezamos en una velocidad muy baja. Miren nada más. Uy, les va a dar una envidia. Nuestra salsa de chile pasilla con tomate riñón. Pero ahora, de pasar a hacer una increíble salsa de mesa, les voy a enseñar cómo se hace un maravilloso guiso sofisticado. Un poco más de tomate riñón, que ya está cocinado, 3 chiles guajillos tostados, 2 chiles anchos tostados también, 1 taza de ajonjolí tostado, 2 tazas de pepita de calabaza tostada, 1 cucharada de sal, 1 cucharada de manteca de cerdo, y necesitamos 4 hojas santa. Procuren no utilizar la costilla o nervadura. Vamos a colocar el caldo y licuar hasta que quede una salsa muy tersa. Tenemos nuestro pipián licuado. Lo primero que vamos a hacer es calentar la manteca, ponerle la salsa. Lo hemos estado haciendo con tanto gusto que hasta un corazón hicimos, vean. Ya está, ya está, ya está, ya está, ya está. Pueden utilizar la pieza que quieran. Hay que ser generoso con esta salsa. Se hacen movimientos suaves para que nos quede pues lo más redondito posible. No se olviden de darle chamba a nuestro chile mije y a nuestro tomate riñón. Yo ya le di chamba a 2 productos. ¿Tú a cuántos le diste ya?
Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Take me home.
Safe news.
Hello.
Hello and good evening. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to AGRF for giving us this wonderful opportunity to share what we've been doing in line with sustaining food security in our part of the world. My name is Dr. Samuel Opoku-Jemfi, and I'm the North Africa Regional Hub Coordinator for Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network. I'm currently based in Marrakesh, Morocco. So CSAYN is a youth-led network based in over 40 African countries. And the goal of this network is to encourage the youth to engage in commercial agriculture and to see agriculture as a means of dealing with unemployment. So some of our activities are mainly centered on the youth, especially the
quello di prenderci cura di chi ha fame, di chi è malato, di chi uscirà dalla pandemia ancora più fragile di come c'è entrato. Ci troviamo ad affrontare una prospettiva del tutto nuova, alla quale dobbiamo far fronte con rapidità, non solo in Italia ma in tutto il mondo. All'emergenza sanitaria globale si è aggiunta inevitabilmente l'emergenza alimentare. Questa crisi sta di fatto incidendo pesantemente sulla vita di tante famiglie, con pesanti effetti economici e sociali. Secondo i dati della Banca Mondiale, ci sono 100 milioni di poveri in più. Solo in Europa si sono persi 10 milioni di posti di lavoro. A queste persone e a chi già soffriva di queste condizioni anche prima del Covid, abbiamo il dovere di offrire soluzioni concrete, immediate, rigorose e dignitose. Avendo ben presente anche nel riparto delle risorse o degli aiuti prossimi e futuri che ogni territorio ha una sua specificità economica e sociale. Mettere in stretta connessione la filiera della solidarietà e del welfare, quella dell'agroalimentare, della distribuzione e quella istituzionale. È ciò che l'emergenza richiede. Del resto, questa giornata si celebra nella data di fondazione della FAO, che con l'enorme impegno profuso da decenni si occupa di accrescere i livelli di nutrizione e delle emergenze alimentari, oggi così aggravate. Porre fine alla fame, raggiungere la sicurezza alimentare, migliorare la nutrizione e promuovere un'agricoltura sostenibile è un obiettivo dell'Agenda 2030 che racchiude in sé una parte fondamentale delle sfide che abbiamo davanti. Tutti parlano di sostenibilità, pochi la realizzano concretamente ogni giorno. Nell'impegno al Ministero ho chiesto di mettere al centro questa responsabilità, promuovendo le buone pratiche, indirizzando gli aiuti verso un nuovo modello di sviluppo, verso scelte inclusive e davvero rispettose dell'ambiente. E voglio fare un plauso al programma di formazione realizzato Future Food Institute, proprio con la FAO, per nuove figure professionali che si impegnano nella mitigazione dei cambiamenti climatici a partire dal settore agroalimentare. Sono aspetti essenziali per sostenere la filiera del cibo, ma anche lo sviluppo sociale, perché dobbiamo impegnarci per avere cura di tutti, senza lasciare indietro nessuno. Per questo il diritto al cibo per tutti, sano e di qualità, deve essere punto prioritario nell'agenda di governo del nostro Paese. Talmente importante che appena usciti da questa situazione, a mio parere, non potremo più rinviare una riflessione seria e collettiva per metterlo a valore anche nella nostra Costituzione. Sì, proprio là, accanto al lavoro e alla salute, vicino di banco del sacrosanto diritto all'essere trattati con senso di umanità. Non può mancare il diritto al cibo per tutti. Ricordarlo oggi non è solo importante, ma a mio avviso assolutamente necessario. Grazie a tutti e a tutte e buon lavoro.
Hi, I'm Nancy Roman, President and CEO of PHA, and we're here today to talk about food systems, and I'm standing beside an important part of my family's food system, our garden. Right here are green bean vines, and we had many great pots of green beans off these vines. And here you see our kale crop, and some of it was in the chickpea curry last night. And here you see a couple of peppers, more peppers. And I wish I could show you the whole thing. But this garden around, with the grocery store around the corner is really our family's whole food system. And most of the people in the immediate community, they may not grow their own food, but they have access to good food like this. Unfortunately, when you widen the circle to the greater DC area around us, the food system becomes very uneven. There are so many people who don't even have a grocery store to access produce. The produce in corner stores is limited and unreliable, and they're forced often to rely on calorie-dense, nutrient-poor fast food. This has always been unfair. But now it's really unconscionable, isn't it? We know that food equals health. And we see with COVID-19 that people who live in food deserts are dying disproportionately of COVID-19. We've got to do better. I am so grateful to the United Nations for engaging this conversation about how we leverage our food system for health, for the planet, for everybody. We've got to end hunger. These social problems are solvable problems, and food is an under-leveraged resource. So I'm excited you're here today. I look forward to the conversation, and let's do better. Safe, nutritious food for all is a goal that requires a concerted community response. In a moment, You'll hear from one of PHA's great partners, the Central California Food Bank, about how they're addressing hunger by recovering good, nutritious food from across the Central Valley. You'll then hear from Manal Kahi, one of the young leaders we'll be featuring at our Emerging Leader Dialogue taking place next Thursday. After moving to the United States from Lebanon, Manal and her brother went on a quest to find good hummus. A lack of quality options inspired the founding of Eat Off Beat, a New York City-based catering company that employs talented refugee cooks to share traditional dishes from their home countries. Through cherished recipes and food traditions, we all find home wherever we are. And I'm so pleased to have Manal and Chef Mariama from Senegal share a beloved dish with you, the global community. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, from the lush agricultural abundance of Central California. My name is Natalie Caples, and I'm the co-CEO of Central California Food Bank. We're here in the city of Fresno at the wonderful Food Center. Central California Food Bank is the largest emergency food distributor in Central California, and our vision is a hunger-free Central Valley. So when the UN Food Summit announced their goal was zero waste and zero hunger by 2030, we were here for it.
It's a lofty goal, but we're working hard out here to reduce waste and tackle the root causes of hunger. With the help of over 300 distribution agency partners in Fresno, Madera, Kings, Kern, and Tulare counties, we're so excited for the UN Food Summit and the incredible work being done to reduce both hunger and food waste across the world. I'm Kim Dildine, co-CEO of Central California Food Bank, and although we live in the breadbasket of the nation and have cultivated strong relationships to address hunger, 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 3 children in our community still struggle.
What Kim just said is the perfect example of how our current food systems work for some and not for others. It's a perplexing reality when you look at the disparities between ethnic groups, differing geographies such as rural and urban communities, and even gender. We have to work together to make food This is where Central California Food Bank time and energy. We seriously believe together we can do this.
The Central Valley produces 1/4 of our nation's food and 40% of the nation's fruits, nuts, and other table foods. We're so grateful for the amazing relationships that we've forged over our 28-year history with local farmers and agricultural partners that want to see the fruits of their labor benefit the local community. Without their partnership and generosity, families that rely on the Emergency Food Network would not have access to any fruits and vegetables.
Central California Food Bank knows that one of the many ways we can solve hunger is by addressing edible food waste. In the state of California, we throw away over 6 million tons of food that with the right framework could make it onto the table of hungry families. We are dedicated to diverting as much from the landfill as possible. In partnership with local agricultural partners, manufacturers, school districts, and grocery stores, we've been able to save 18 million pounds of food from the landfill since 2017. As a food bank, we will continue to fight for our food insecure families, but real lasting change can only be accomplished through policy. That's why we engage with the public and private sectors, as well as the government, to advocate for policies that make a real impact on the daily lives of those that are hungry. It is our responsibility and privilege to leverage whatever spheres of influence we have to make sure that everybody recognizes that food is a basic right. We know what works to address hunger and prevent people from falling through the cracks. We need to expand social safety nets like SNAP, free and reduced school meals, and supplemental security income to ensure a future free from hunger.
Hi everyone, my name is Manal. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Eat Off Beat. We are a food company based in New York that brings the best global home cooking from around the world to our customers' doors all over New York City. Today we're at our office here in Long Island City in Queens, New York, and we're going to be learning a new recipe from Chef Mariama, who is from Senegal and who will be here to teach us chicken yassa. Yeah. Mariama, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi everybody, my name is Mariama. I'm from Senegal. I live in the Bronx. I'm a mother of 5 kids. I've been here in Eat Off Beat like 2.5 years to be a chef here.
Great. And what are you teaching us today?
I'm teaching
Yasa?
Yasa, yeah.
Perfect.
Hello again, and thank you for joining today. We're so thrilled to present a series of leading voices from across the food system who will illustrate how we can use the urgency of this moment and the transformative power of food to create positive change for our health and our planet. So these are going to be fast-paced conversations, and we invite you to engage directly by leaving your comments in the live stream. So I'd like to start today with Dari, Dr. Daria Shmazafarian, Dean of the Tufts University School of Nutrition, a physician, professor, how we can use food as a tool. So Dari has said previously, the United States is a national nutrition crisis. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, well, I think, we not only face a national nutrition crisis, we have a global nutrition crisis. Here in New England, it's a beautiful fall and it's apple picking season. And my kids this weekend, 8, 10, and 11-year-old, went and picked these beautiful fresh apples, the bounty of nature. And yet think about how few people in our country and how few people in the world have access to fresh, healthy foods. Food is the #1 cause of poor health on the planet, and that's mostly due to chronic diseases, diet-related chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancers. And that incredible burden of human suffering, combined with undernutrition, is causing economic devastation and is also devastating our environment, water use, land use, climate change, stress to the oceans. And so if you put together the health consequences, both for chronic diseases and undernutrition, the economic consequences of lost productivity and preventable healthcare spending, the sustainability consequences, and then on top of that, the disparities, the stark disparities and inequities in all of these things, we really face a global nutrition crisis, and one that can actually be addressed and that I hope will be addressed because otherwise we're in big trouble.
So, Dari, you've been a part of many of these conversations, and some things get lots of attention and some things get left out. What do you think are the things that most need attention that aren't getting it?
Well, I think, a couple things. I think first, the different pieces or aspects of the food system that are important to address have been traditionally siloed. And so you have some groups talking about undernutrition and hunger. You have some groups talking about disparities. You have some groups talking about non-communicable chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes. You have some groups talking about sustainability. I think that siloing is a big problem. And what's particularly missing, I think, in the global conversation is the focus on chronic diseases. When I hear people talking about nutrition globally, they almost always are focusing on undernutrition. And of course, it's a terrible problem. We need to address undernutrition. But many millions more people are dying and suffering from chronic diseases. And so it's not just about getting food to people, it's about getting nutritious food to people. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing that's missing is the economic case to do all this. For some reason, we've been talking about food as though it's a moral issue and an ethical issue to give people healthy food. That's true, of course that's true, but it's also a major economic issue. There's money to be gained by preventing people from being sick. There's money to be gained by business innovation, by creating a 21st century breadbasket for the world of healthy, equitable, sustainable food. And I think the business case to doing this is ultimately what's going to turn us around the corner, because unfortunately in the world, if we just talk about health and we just talk about equity, I don't think policies will change fast enough. So we really need to make the case that this is an economic imperative for the world to fix food.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Derry. I agree with you. And especially on this issue of the economics, it's sort of crazy that people don't focus on the extent of the cost of not addressing this. So we're going to have to move on now. And I'd like to turn to PHA's beloved Jide Williams, a physician who's been on the front lines of COVID in the acute care ward of New York City's Columbia University Medical Center. Do we have Jide coming on?
Yes, hi.
Hey, great. So listen, Jide, love seeing you there in your scrubs. You've been practicing medicine for a good long while, and but I just want to begin with your experience on the front lines of COVID as you've been, and just what your insights and learnings have been at this just critically difficult time.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. So my experience has really reinforced two things to me. The first thing is more philosophical, but it's the interconnectedness of human society. And so I found myself treating COVID patients from all segments of society, whether they were Black or white or rich or poor or old or young, every segment of society. And the virus showed in a very real and tangible way just how artificial, some of our divisions are. The virus began in one part of the world and spread to every part of the world. The virus began in one part of the country and spread to all parts of the country. Begins in one part of the city and spreads to all part of the city. It begins in one person in our homes and then spreads to everyone in our home. The second thing is the blinding COVID disparities that I witnessed on the front lines. I've always been aware of the striking health disparities that we see, but the disparities that COVID unveiled were almost blinding. To the extent that, on my service at one point, more than 90% of my patients were Black or brown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I know you're so passionate about how food can reduce disparities. So just drill a little deeper on that, because of course that's what PHA is all about. And I think one of the enormous opportunities for the UN Food System Summit is to really look at the equity issue. If we're going to fix it, where do we need to start?
Well, I'm gonna start by just saying that one of the things I'm really excited about with PHA is the incredible, impactful structural things that PHA is doing within the food space to address health equity. The incredible food bank initiative is just one example of many. But, you know, interestingly, Nancy, one of the fun things that people may not know about PHA's body of work is an album that we produced, PHA produced with Hip Hop Public Health, an incredible multi-genre album several years ago called Songs for a Healthier America. I bring this up because one of my favorite things on that album was a song called You Are What You Eat. And it had Ariana Grande in it and other incredible artists. The message of the song really highlighted the importance of food to human biology and also to cultural expression. You know, food, Nancy, is quintessential to health. It is a social determinant of health with the power to positively or negatively impact not just how we feel, but also our risk for disease. You know, a healthy plant-based diet can strengthen our immune systems. It can help us heal when we fall sick. But the wrong food choices can have devastating consequences, increasing our risk for what we call a diet-related diseases such as diabetes, obesity, heart disease, stroke, and even certain cancers. But a lot of these diet-related diseases, Nancy, are a symptom of a larger problem of structural inequities, which causes, you know, communities of color and other lower income communities to have more restrictive food choices than others. And so addressing these structural inequities and access to healthy, affordable food choices and promoting the consumption of these foods can have a powerful impact on human health and human immunity and just human well-being in general. And there is unequivocal evidence to show, Nancy, that disparities in access to healthy food is intricately linked to a lot of the health disparities that we see. So addressing that is a critical piece of the puzzle.
Thank you, Jide. I couldn't agree more. And that's a very good segue to bring in Jane Ewing, because grocery stores and other food retailers have just become an even more critical part of our food system during COVID-19. So I'd like to go to Jane Ewing, the Senior Vice President of Sustainability for Walmart, the United States' largest retailer. And I assume Jane's coming in shortly. Okay, Jane.
Hi, Nancy.
Okay. So anyway, I know, Jane, that Walmart's been working so hard on its sustainability. And, you know, in one of our last conversations, you know, you said that nature really has to be part of the answer. And I'm interested in you drilling down a little bit on that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Nancy. So we've been working hard for the last 15 years on sustainability more broadly, and we set 3 really bold aspirational goals to be powered by renewable energy, create zero waste, and sell more sustainable products. And we've made a lot of progress over recent years, and we've really widened our definition of sustainability to recognize that you just can't separate people from planets. So during Climate Week last company, meaning one that works to restore, renew, and replenish in addition to preserving our planet. So he announced specific new goals focused on combating climate change and reversing nature loss. So on climate change, we're targeting zero emissions across our global operations by 2040. And then along with the Walmart Foundation, we're committing to help protect, manage, or restore at least 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean by 2030. And as you know, Nancy, our natural systems are changing. And what they're showing us is we're just not doing enough. We're doing irreversible damage to our planet. I'm sure you've seen studies that show animal populations that have declined by over 60% in just over 40 years. And 1/5 of the Amazon's rainforest has disappeared in just 50 years. So healthy societies, resilient economies, and thriving businesses rely on nature to provide food, to provide products and services. Over half of Walmart's US sales come from our grocery business. And as you know, many American families depend on us to affordably keep food on the table. So our vision at Walmart is to help transform food and product supply chains to be truly regenerative,
working in harmony with nature to protect, restore, and sustainably use our natural resources. So without action, we know, it could be 3 years, 5, 10, or 20 years from now, resources could become too expensive to produce. And more than that, the ecosystem services we all rely on for free, like water purification, crop pollination, and disease control, they could all be at risk. So we've been working on making our products and our produce more sustainable. We had never set this explicit goal and this explicit aspiration around nature. So for us, the question wasn't about whether nature matters. It was about how could we recognize and build on the work that many are already doing? How could we prioritize and measure the practices that matter most? And then how do we reconcile this hard reality that making change at the landscape level requires lots of individual actions all happening at the same time to be truly effective?
Thank you, Jane. And with our last minute, I just want you to touch on something I know is near and dear to your heart, because you've mentioned it a lot, is collaborating. And you've specifically mentioned place-based solutions that rely on all of us, companies, government, communities, and NGOs working together. What opportunities do you see to do that with this summit?
Yeah, absolutely, Nancy. I mean, we're highly aligned with this aspiration of increasing access to nutritious food, protecting and restoring natural resources, and supporting expanded choice and supply of food, and then how we promote this inclusive economic opportunity for people working all along the food system. So none of these transitions are easy, and they require business, government, and civil society working together. And we do have a history at Walmart of taking collaborative approaches, things like Project Gigaton, where we're bringing together suppliers, over 2,300 suppliers, to report out how many metric tons of emissions they've avoided. To date, that's over 230 million metric tons. So it's an example of broad-scale collaboration, but we're really excited about this potential of driving these local place-based solutions. Really, we're committed to empowering suppliers on this journey of rewiring our food and product supply chains, so sourcing can be a force for regenerating forests, oceans, and land. So our teams are really focused on this, and we've got several examples. One would be Sabah in Malaysia, where suppliers are working with local governments, NGOs, and communities to help preserve the natural ecosystems and preserve the local people's livelihoods. So we're working with suppliers Unilever and Nestle. They're using Project Gigaton guidance and resources to help avoid deforestation and drive a more sustainable palm industry. And you know how critical this work is, because palm oil is so widely used in cooking oil and many different food products. And it is in high demand, which can contribute to deforestation. So our view, Nancy, is that no one person or organization can do this work alone. It requires learning and commitment from all of us. And no matter which role you play in the supply chain, the challenges we face as a society they are significant, and we have to work together to help restore, renew, and replenish, in addition to conserving this planet we all call home.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. We'll next turn to another great leader in retail, Gordon Reed, the president of Stop and Shop. That's a grocery store chain serving the northeastern United States, one of the Ahold Delhaize brands.
Should be up, Nancy. You can see it.
Oh, hey. Bye, Jane. Hello, Gordon.
Hey, Nancy. How are you doing? Good afternoon.
See you, and there you are in the Stop and Shop.
Absolutely.
I see some great produce behind you. Listen, Ahold Delhaize US recently announced its partnership with PHP to increase healthier food sales and publicly disclose the percentage of food sales to healthier options. So how will that affect the way that you run your store?
Yeah, well, as you say, Nancy, what we've made is a public commitment at Stop and Shop to stock even more healthy products in our business and to encourage sales of those products. And we have committed that we will report out every year as to our progress and how we're moving forward with that. We'll look at that, and in our stores we'll be driving our private brand and making these even more healthy. We've been working on these the last number of years to take out salt, sugar, and fats, and we'll be encouraging some of our national suppliers to actually sort of get involved. And we'll be looking at our price and our promotions and our advertising to actually encourage people to buy more of those healthy products. And in our marketing communications, we'll help people understand how they can make healthier choices and come up with some exciting and fun recipes and meal solutions to sort of eat healthier. A lot of this will bring a lot more ease into our business we have a guiding stars system in the business, which every product is given no stars, 1, 2, or 3 stars, and therefore on the shelf ticket, you can see what your products and what you're buying and how healthy they are. So obviously 1 star is pretty healthy and 3 stars is very healthy. And that makes it easier for people to choose those products and select more healthy.
Yeah. Well, I really want to commend you on spending the advertising dollars to steer toward the healthy products, because that's been an area where there's been a little bit of fear about moving forward, but really that's where there's just enormous opportunity. I like to say, sometimes people say we'll follow the consumer, but it's hard to follow the consumer because the retailer has the power to lead the consumer. So talk a little bit about what all these changes mean for consumers and what the future looks like in your store for consumers.
No, and I think you're right. I think that retailers have a responsibility to get involved in healthy and help consumers eat more healthy. And with our business, I mean, obviously healthy foods mean a more equitable and sustainable food system. And say retailers, I think, are a key part of that. You know, with their access to healthy foods in all of our stores, they help fight chronic disease. As one of the speakers said earlier, you know, the access to healthy food, it helps fight obesity, it helps fight heart disease and diabetes. And those are key killers in our society. And we're going to do that by actually offering great value on these products and make sure that we're actually priced right and the customers can afford these, and also great quality. And you know yourself from the work in food banks that's been done, that it's not just food, it's healthy food that people deserve to have every single day. And I use our private brand Nature's Promise, which really is our own brand, very healthy, free from organic, and again, we're making that accessible to people. And I think education is another one we'll be looking at. We have a team of nutritionists that will help you, sort of give you advice and help you eat more healthy. And we want to empower people to make simple, healthy choices that they can, you know, really sort of change their lifestyle. And even then, when we get down to food banks, which it's a Stop and Shop in the Northeast, are the biggest supporter of the food banks in the Greater Boston area. Really, it's about, as I mentioned earlier, healthy food. It's key that we don't send all candy and sheet cake to these the food banks. It's about producing, giving healthy food. We'll be giving more produce and more proteins as we get through this next year, as well as our cash donations. So healthy food is fundamental to our future, and we are all in on making this happen.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. You've been a real leader. I really appreciate it. A piece of transforming the food system is helping the world embrace sustainable diets. And so now I'd like to turn to Ethan Brown, CEO of Beyond Meat, to explore what we choose to eat can influence the broad food system. So, Ethan, to the screen.
Hi there. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. I hear you, and better than that, I see you.
Great to see you, Nancy.
Great to see you. Listen, in one of our last conversations, you said that our education systems and our food systems were broken, and that we need to, quote, put nutrition into the education system so we don't need to remediate adults after a lifetime of bad decisions. That really resonated with me at the time, and I'd just like you to elaborate.
Sure. No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you and with the broader audience. My view there is really in two areas. If you look at primary and secondary education, we don't do a lot to educate children about what they're putting in the environment, nor do we do a lot to educate children about what's going into the environment and the fact that what we put into the environment often comes back to us. Yet there's a long history of literature and research around both of these concepts. I was recently rereading Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, one of the great pioneers. And so DDT is probably the biggest example of that. But we grow up learning in school that nature is a subject for us to work with versus us being part of nature, and our bodies are a subject for us to feed so that we can have energy, but we don't think about the food that we're putting in our bodies. And so as a child, you're not really taught. And then it's worsened by the fact that you are in a school lunch program that is feeding to you daily some of the things the medical community is so concerned about. So you grow up on a very, very steady diet, if you're eating a normal American diet, of things the medical community is concerned about, whether it's heme iron or significant level of saturated fat or amines, carcinogens, et cetera, in our foods. And only after you've had that experience, then you get out as an adult and learn about the impact of all of those things on your body. So my view is, why not get after it at the beginning? Help kids understand that what they put in their body will have long-term and short-term impacts on their health. And so working with communities and schools to do that is a big priority for Beyond Meat.
Yeah. Well, it's that, you know, things are beginning to change because, as you know, consumer interest in plant-based products has never been higher. So what do you think is really driving the consumer demand? And do you think it will stick, or, if we have the education, maybe that's a piece of making it stick. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think what's happening, and we're really fortunate, talked about this before, Victor Hugo, great quote, and nothing is more powerful than ideas, time has come. And what's happening here is that the work that we're doing is being fueled by public interest, in the sense that whether it's the connection between heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, and the food that we put in our bodies, or the issues we have around climate, or the issues we have around resources or animal welfare, consumers are hearing more and more about this every day. And a lot of that has to do with the digitalization of communication. You don't need to go to the library anymore to read a scientific study, right? You can look on the internet and you'll see whether it's NIH or World Health Organization or pick your favorite university publishing these studies and say, hey, there's something wrong with the levels of animal protein you're consuming, right? And then you go to climate and you hear about all the issues around climate and livestock, then lastly around animal welfare. So these things are bombarding the consumer. Now, we don't want to give up meat. I love meat. I grew up eating it. It's a terrific source of protein. But what we can do is think about meat differently. And that's what we do with Beyond Meat. Think, instead of getting that meat from an animal, let's get it directly from plants. And then we can leave out some of the things that are concerned to the medical community. So that momentum is what's pushing our company forward and the consumer to a healthier place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And maybe just, 1 minute on, how do you think we can use plant-based products to drive people towards more sustainable diets in general?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. We've done a lot of work with universities on this question. You look at Michigan, for example, the study we did with them around the life cycle environmental impact of our products. The results were phenomenal. We had 90% less greenhouse gas emissions, 99% less water use, 93% less land, about half the energy. And so just being able to consume the products we love, grow up eating, but do it in a way that's better for our planet is such an amazing opportunity for the American public and for my kids, frankly. It's, we love going to the fast food restaurants that serve our product because we can enjoy the traditions that we've always enjoyed, but do it with plant-based versus animal-based meat. But the last thing is these things are interconnected. So it wasn't just the Michigan study. It was also the Stanford study we did. Because it's not just about the impact on the environment, it's about the impact on our bodies. And we're able to solve for both of those things. So if you look at the Stanford study, switching people from 2 daily servings of animal protein to 2 daily servings of Beyond Meat, LDL cholesterol dropped 10 points, statistically and clinically significant. TMAO, which we all are beginning to understand the microbiome, has a strong association with heart disease. That also drops statistically and clinically in a significant way, and of course, weight loss. So the idea that we can get out of the issues that we've created around the food system is one that keeps me fired up every day. We can do it. We just have to use social change and technology to get there. And that's happening every day. And it makes me so hopeful about the future.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. I really, really, really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is ask everybody to come back onto the screen, okay? And turn on your microphones, turn on your cameras, and we're going to take some questions from the group. So we've got Jide and Jane and Gordon and Ethan and Natalie and Kim. And I'm just going to sort of pitch a couple of these to you two at a time. And I'm going to be starting off with Derry and Jane. So we know the opportunity for food systems transformation is great, but so are the challenges. So I'd like you to call out some of the barriers that you think we need to overcome if we're going to make this happen. Sara, you start off?
Yes, I can start. Thank you. Well, I think there's several, but there's a couple at least. First, we have to get the nutrition science right. We can't be talking about sugar, salt, and fat as the causes of the example is of many healthy fats. We have to be focused on food quality, understand the impact of processing. So I think the definition of healthy and being sure we're using the cutting edge science is crucial. Too often we just sort of assume we know how healthy food is defined. And I think the second challenge is to ensure we have true cost accounting for the real cost of foods. I think that's probably the single biggest missing link, which brings back to the economic issues we were discussing, Nancy, that, a healthy food, whether it's packaged or fresh food, its true costs or its healthcare, downstream healthcare costs, equity costs, sustainability costs, and an unhealthy food likewise. And right now we have a system where the true value of healthy foods is not captured in their price, and the true harms of unhealthy food are not captured in their price.
Yeah. Jane, do you want to comment on that?
I would probably call out three, Nancy. I would call out access, so making sure that consumers the world over have access to healthy food, and would completely agree with your point, Daria, about making sure that the science is right there. Secondly, I would call out affordability. So, if the perception is that, healthy food costs a lot more and it's going to break my family's budget, then, it's going to be more difficult for me to feed my family in a healthy way. So how do we ensure healthy food is affordable? And the third one I would call out is consumer education and consumer behavior. Like we can say a plant-based diet is a good thing, but unless consumers really understand why and believe that and actually change their behavior, then we'll continue to have some big barriers to climb. So they would be the three biggest ones I would call out, Nancy.
Thank you, Jane. So next, I want to turn to Manal and Natalie and Kim and just ask a little bit about, one of the goals of this summit is to raise awareness of the power of food systems among a broader audience. So what do you think is missing from the conversation right now? Let's start off with Manal.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Nancy, for having us and kind of reaching out to hear some of the more quiet voices, let's say, or the voices a little less heard. We at Eat Off Beat, we are a company that brings the best global home cooking from all around the world to our customers here in New York. We do that by hiring talented home cooks who happen to be refugees by status, and then delivering their food the way they make it at home to our customers all over New York. For us, what we feel is missing right now, as a company, we have three goals: quality jobs in the food industry, which is something we believe is definitely a big challenge. Two, building bridges between us, the people making the food, and our customers. Today, they're all over New York City, hopefully soon in the US, but whoever is eating our customer, whoever is having our food, we believe there's a bit of a disconnect between people, consumers having food at home, and whoever prepared their meals, whoever, across the entire chain, from sourcing to preparation to delivery. We're also trying to work on all of that inequity there. And third, for us, our ultimate goal is really about changing the narrative around refugees, around immigration, by showcasing a different and a more positive story, right? Our story is one where refugees are the chefs, they are the heroes, they are the ones helping New York today discover something new, something different, and not the other way around. So it's really about flipping perspective. For us, again, based on everything I mentioned now, for us, we're using food as a tool. It's a tool to change narratives, to rewrite narratives, to change people's minds. And that's really something we see as a major opportunity. But maybe to answer also your question in terms of what's still problematic or other issues that we still face or that we believe need to change in the industry in general is a few points that I've already mentioned: that disconnect between people eating and whoever prepared or was involved in the entire chain of getting their food to their table. And the inequity across functions in the food industry, whether that's, inequities we see between very practically in roles in our company or others, right? Inequities between chefs, the delivery team, maybe even marketing functions, inequities between small food businesses and maybe the bigger names, like bigger companies, platforms, tech platforms who, I won't go too much into that, but there's a bit of inequity when a delivery company charges 35% to get a meal from a restaurant to the consumer. So those are some of the inequities we see in the system today that we feel need to be addressed.
Thank you so much, Manal. And where time is tight, but I do want to get in Natalie and Kim. So if you can be succinct.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things that we're so thankful for is that our food bank has been able to participate in this conversation. I think something that's missing from the broader conversation as a whole is realizing that a lot of individuals rely on the emergency food network in order to get food. And so having food banks be a part of the conversation, engaging food banks to ensure that we are, that we're at the table and we're providing insight regarding the struggles that our clients are having when accessing nutritious, healthy food, talking about food deserts, and just generally engaging the nonprofit community and how we can bring innovative solutions to the table to make an impact on the food system.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And Kim, and then we're going to...
Yeah, I think Natalie really captured it well. Just bringing all of the partners to the table who really touch the food system is really important. So many people in the United States struggle with hunger, and so bringing all the players who are in direct contact, providing them with the food that they need to thrive is really important to meet the need.
Thank you so much. So before we close our session, I really want to welcome one last special guest. So much work about the need for better overall food and resilient food systems. Please welcome humanitarian, active, and founder of the World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres. And we'll bring...
Hi. Hola.
Hola.
Thank you.
Hola, Jose. So your
Hello,
work,
hello.
I'm not sure where you are, but it looks marvelous. Your work with World Central Kitchen around the world to face this crisis. So tell us what you're seeing.
Well, I think I understood your question. Listen, World Central Kitchen, we began on this pandemic back in February, responding to the Princess cruise ship that arrived to Japan with COVID cases. And since then, the world has changed as we know it. We've seen how the food systems of the world are really in a very bad shape in terms of the people in need of food. Today we see that actually, yes, we can produce food to feed the planet, but we've seen moments where entire meat plants have been shut down because COVID. We've seen that many farmers around the world, they've been badly impacted because COVID. We've seen that the people cooking the food, they've been badly impacted because cooking in America and around the world. And the big thing we need to learn from this is that I have a firm belief that the people of the world, and more important, the leaders of the world, I have a feeling like we take food for granted, and we must start taking food seriously. We always hear about energy to move our cars and our factory. We like energy. Offshore is important, but we must start giving priority to the number one most important source of energy on planet Earth. And this is the food that moves every man and woman every day. So the people in this call, we know the power of food, but we need to be bringing this conversation to the higher ups, People like you should be next to the ear of every president in every country, in every major organization, with one simple message. Food is who humanity is. Food is the way we move our community forward, and food should never again be the problem, but food should be the solution. So what I see is that all the people in this phone call, the people listening to us, we have the know-how in how to make things happen, but we will only do it with boots on the ground. Every great idea, every great new policy, America or in any other country, that has to do with food, and the most realizing that while food is the talk, the important talk, and we talk about food waste, we know that we produce, but the problem is food waste and food preservation and food distribution. But we need to start calling this the right thing. When we do food waste, what actually we're doing is wasting the lives of people. Food waste equals less opportunity to many men and women, especially in poor rural communities. And now we understood that it's not only the badly called third world, the ones that may be hunger and poor. Now we see that in the rich countries of the world, we also have those rural communities. And even in our big cities in Europe, in America, we have people that are food insecure and don't know what they're going to be serving their families. This is what I am. As I've been around America for the last 7 months on this pandemic.
Thank you, Jose. And you anticipated my next question. So just moments ago, I asked our speakers about engaging a broader audience. And you hit that point as well. How can we do that? If we really do believe that people who are knowledgeable about the critical power of food should be next to every president, and and we need to raise awareness, what do we do?
Well, what we do is like we knock on the door, and if door open, we jump through the window. What we might is, and probably use how much I like talk less, do more. We need to be really next to the people, need the help of the big governments, of the big and small companies, of the NGOs. We need to understand that requires everybody to keep moving solutions to make sure that we have a better world. I just came back from Beirut a few weeks ago after the explosion that destroyed a big part of the city. One of the things I'm very hopeful is that I saw young people coming out to begin helping without nobody calling organized system, volunteering people to help. What that means, we need to be bringing people, young people around the world into this call. And we need to start being more critical of the claims of success we all do. If we are claiming 30, 40 years ago that we will end childhood hunger by the year 2000, and we fall way short, we should realize why did we fall short. If we are doing big claims of ending world hunger by the year 2030 or 2040, and I already know that we are not going to achieve that, we need to be, instead of all clapping at each other because we all say the right things. But when you go to the poor communities, see that as you know, World Central Kitchen is an emergency relief organization. But then we never leave our communities. In Puerto Rico, we have almost 200 farms that we've been next to them, investing in them so they could be productive again. We've done the same in Guatemala. We are doing the same in Bahamas. We've done the same in Haiti. This is obviously very important. But unfortunately, of the many issues we can be talking, let me just give you one that is very important for us to understand what happens sometimes. When a country like Haiti was affected by the big earthquake that shattered the life of thousands of Haitians, the international community came to help. I was very happy to see the leading role of the United States and the leading role of UN. Many things happened right, others could be better, but let me tell you one that didn't go. we brought so much food, we began feeding everybody. But all the food that came from the rich countries. All the farmers in Haiti that were producing, all of the sudden were out of the business because nobody was buying the rice from them. All of the sudden, those farmers, they added to the number of hungry people that were moving and came for food and help. When the international aid stopped coming, all of a sudden Haiti had to be buying grain outside, in more money than even. All of a sudden, that infrastructure of farming kind of semi-disappeared. The rich countries of the world must do better to really empower people, especially after disasters, so we don't enrich ourselves at the expense of making them poorer. So at the end, this is equity. This is making sure that we support big companies, but cannot be at the of the middle. We must make sure that the food system we all share, it's really shared by all equally.
That's a very strong note to conclude on, Jose, and I really want to thank you and thank to all of our distinguished speakers. This global relay is just the start of a year-long conversation leading up to the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit. It's a bold and ambitious summit that we hope will change the way we produce and leverage food. And we'd like you to stay engaged with this conversation. And you can do that next week by listening to our next generation leaders on food on Thursday, October 22nd from 11 to 12:15, where we'll spotlight 10 amazing young leaders, including Manal, whom you've heard from, bringing new ideas and new energy to all of our existing ideas and existing energy to really make a great difference. Thank you so very much.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Alba. I'm a model philanthropist. I'm an advocate on issues of agriculture and food security and rural women's and girls' equality. But most recently, I've been given the opportunity to live out, I guess, my activism dreams by being honored with the position of Goodwill Ambassador for the International Fund for Agriculture, IFAD, whose work, obviously, I am extremely proud of. Sara, it is so good to be here with you today.
And my name is Sara Mbagobunu. I am IFAD, the International Fund for Agriculture's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, based out of Rome.
We know that hunger is rising in some countries, and some of the most vulnerable people, of course, are smallholder farmers in rural communities across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, who both struggle to grow enough food and as well struggle economically when there's economic instability. So I guess my question is, how are rural farmers being impacted right now due to the pandemic? What do people need to know about their plight? But I guess also, what do people need to know about their potential as well? I don't want to leave that out.
Sustainable recovery and enhanced resilience is basically part of IFAD's core work. Now, you mentioned Africa and specifically in East and Southern Africa, but just looking right across, it's relevant for everything. In fact, the World Bank figures tell us that this is a recession in the region, for the first time in 25 years, and we can actually be seeing negative growth of about 5%. Basically, the pandemic has cost the region roughly around 79 billion in output losses. So, those figures are astronomical. We see households' welfares impacted, purchasing power has been completely eroded. Very dramatically, in some instances 7 to 14%. We see a huge increase in poverty because of the decline in many economies. We have seen an actual reduction between 2.6 and 7% of agricultural production alone, and there's 73 million people at risk of food insecurity. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown and fear of contaminating and getting the virus, many governments, if I just deep down in East Africa, have decided to sort of close borders in terms of containing the pandemic. But essentially what that does, the protectionism and the export bans actually have a knock-on effect on food. So this is really, 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 really difficult. And then coupled with the fact that, most countries now don't have the resources to import food. So there's that gap. This food is not coming in from rural areas. They can't import food. So you have a double whammy. Sabrina, how did you sort of get into all of this? Where's your passion coming from?
So when I'm looking at issues like the ones that IFAD is tackling and the ones that you just mentioned, it definitely comes from a how can I help personal type place. My mom left Somalia to make a better life for me and my siblings, and she always wanted to go back. She had hopes that she would raise children who could help her do that and make the continent a safer place for everyone. She left at a time of civil war and when there was a lot of struggle in East Africa, particularly Somalia, where she's from. But she had hopes that, that we could help and that she could fall asleep every night not knowing that there are countless women and children across the land that are suffering. And I know, Sara, you know better than most that as we speak, women are having to make life-altering decisions, like pulling their kids from school when they can't afford fees because their crops fail due to drought. I mean, these communities right now are suffering because they can't get access to clean water. There are floods devastating land. Malnutrition is rising because of a loss of healthy food supply. All these issues are related directly to external shocks like the economy, wars, the pandemic, and I don't need to say it twice, we all know it's directly related to climate change. All the while, Africa is emerging from its worst drought in years. Locusts are ravaging East Africa. Climate change has made the future for rural people that much more precarious, but it's also made action that much more urgent. But you know, because I've gotten involved, I know there's hope. And every day we learn about these issues, and it just goes to show us how much more there is to do and how we can all play a role in highlighting these very real and tangible solutions. I'm aware we're running out of time, Sara, but I do want to ask you, if you had one call to action about this issue, what would it be for the world and for this audience?
You know, IFAD to date has repurposed roughly about 120 million of our ongoing operations to be more responsive to COVID, whether it's inputs, whether it's provision of services, whether it's provision of seeds, whether it's offtake to markets and so on. And we know that there's a huge financing gap of about, 115 billion. So you can imagine that, what we have managed to provide as a very first upfront measure of which governments and communities are really appreciative of, we have a huge financing gap there. 115 billion is actually what is needed for transformation of our food system so that we become more inclusive, more resilient, create jobs locally, and provide upstream opportunities. So this is my call for action, literally. It's absolutely critical. Now is the moment to act. And as you said, African farmers are very resilient. You know, in the face of all this, when they discovered that they had, you know, basically harvests that they couldn't take to market because of lockdown, many of them turned around and said, okay, how can we store this? How can we dry it? How can we add value with it? If they had the right equipment, if they had access to energy to do the actual transformation of these products, they could have saved a lot more. If we had more advanced logistical systems and transport routes, this would have helped. The African Union, the East African community, all around the continent, there is an agenda for regional integration. And I think these investments channeled in the right places, including research and development around specific technologies, will make all the difference. So we must act now, and we must mobilize resources now.
I so agree with you. I think it's extremely clear that many smallholder farmers are struggling and need our support. I think that's why Idris and I are calling on leaders and governments to show their leadership and really step up and lead and double their support to agriculture and EFAD this year and in the next year in the upcoming replenishment. There's also an important role for the private sector in this room to partner with EFAD, as we both know, and this is going to provide real hope and real change for millions of people living on the edge. I want to thank you, Sara, for your determination and persistence for the most vulnerable farmers across Africa and for hosting this critical conversation.
Welcome everyone to the 24-hour global relay on World Food Day. I'm Ruth Richardson. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. And as we all know, COVID-19 has presented the world with a moment of reckoning. It has reminded us all that we live in interconnected and codependent systems, as Sara and Sabrina have outlined in the video. Sara and Sabrina have pointed attention to the critical connections between smallholder farmers and external shocks like climate, war, and pandemics, and the implications especially for women and children. Importantly, the broader attention these issues are gaining has also shone a light on individuals and initiatives that embody resilience in the face of crisis. This is where we see hope. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Global Alliance for the Future of Food is announcing a new phase of our Beacons of Hope initiative. This is a program of work that celebrates the people and initiatives working to transform food systems, showing us that another way is possible and is already happening, leading us to a future based on the values that Sara and Sabrina have pointed to, like inclusion, resilience, and the rights to things like access to land and clean water. It is in the spirit that we are hosting today's session. Over the next 50 minutes, we'll be taking a virtual trip starting in Canada, where I am, and traveling south through the central time zone to Costa Rica. Each speaker will have about 7 minutes and we'll end with a Q&A. So make sure to share your questions with us via Twitter or Facebook using the hashtag Voices of Food Systems. Okay, let's start our journey and meet our first speaker. That was a little trip across the Canadian landscape with the fall colors. With that, I would now like to welcome Susanna Clausen, Vice Chair of Food Secure Canada. Susanna, please turn on your camera and your microphone.
Hello, Ruth.
Hi, Susanna. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's quickly jump into the questions. First of all, can you just tell us in your own words about your initiative? What do you do, and what is the impact?
Gladly. So first, thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor to be part of this event. As I tell you about our work at Food Secure Canada, I'd just like to quickly situate myself as a settler on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, where the University of British Columbia is situated, which is where I actually work and study. It's important to know that despite Canada being a high-income country, the food system in Canada is the site of many inequities, including historic and ongoing settler colonialism that continues to impact Indigenous peoples in many ways, including access to traditional food lands and foodways. It is also the site of persistently high rates of food insecurity, especially for Black households and in Indigenous communities. And this situation has certainly gotten worse as a result of the pandemic. There are limited rights, protections, and poor conditions for food workers, especially those who are racialized and those without permanent status in Canada. And we have an agricultural model that is predominantly input intensive and extremely capitalized with high debt loads and low profitability for farmers. So it's important to mention all that because our vision at Food Secure Canada is, ou en français, le réseau pour une alimentation durable, is for food justice for all through sustainable, inclusive, and nourishing food systems. So we really aim to work at the intersection of all of these issues by first supporting an inclusive and democratic food movement, and also by advocating for integrated food policy to address these complex and intersecting issues, particularly at the federal and the national policy table. So we really work in this space between the grassroots and policy, including with elected officials. Probably our single biggest impact has been through our efforts towards the creation of a national food policy. This has been a foundational goal and area of work of Food Secure Canada for a long time. It began about 12 years ago with the People's Food Policy Project, which was a national exercise in grassroots democracy where 3,500 people contributed to a vision for a national food policy. And we've continued to build on that with other advocacy and capacity building efforts around food policy and the right to food. And in 2019, the federal government announced the first ever food policy for Canada as a result of this huge collective effort, which we really feel has the potential to be transformative. And I understand that the Minister of Agriculture will be part of a future session in, I think, the next slot about the development of Canada's food policy. And we continue to push for policy changes. So we recently released a policy action plan in the context of COVID-19 called Growing Resilience and Equity, about how to seize this moment to transform our food systems, which includes some really important opportunities to better value essential food workers, support Black and Indigenous food sovereignty, and the creation of a national universal school food program. And then I just want to mention another thing that we do, which is perhaps a little less tangible, but equally important, is our work around relationship building. So Food Secure Canada has historically been a sort of convener of the food movement from coast to coast to coast. And the organization was actually born out of a meeting of diverse coalition of organizations and individuals on World Food Day in 2004. So 16 years ago to the day. And an integral part of our work is to bring people together across regions, cultures, languages, and issues in the food system. And this is very challenging work. And we are actually in the process of learning how to do it better all the time, and also unlearning some of our ways of working and convening that have excluded or negatively impacted some communities, especially people from Indigenous communities, Black communities, and other people of color who have experienced racism and oppression from the predominantly white settler food movement. So this work is ongoing, and we really hope it is impactful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Susanna. And you paint sort of a shocking picture, I think, probably for many about Canada, because I think we often have a rosy reputation out there, and yet there are deep-seated structural issues in our country around food sovereignty, food access, food security. So in that context, which you've painted so beautifully, despite the very deep challenges that we face, what does food system transformation look like for you within that context?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to mention too that my contributions today are really the result of working alongside and learning from some really incredible leaders, like my fellow board members at FSC, staff at Food Secure Canada, and especially our chair, Milana Roberts, and our executive director, Giselle Yasmin, and from some amazing collaborators and partners that we have in this work, like Paul Taylor and Don Morrison and Jolene Andrew from the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty. So I thought a lot about this question, and it's such a good one. And I thought of three main things. The first is, for me, transformation looks empowering. It doesn't look like a continuation of the charity model or philanthropy, which we see so much in Canada. People need to be enabled to meet their own needs in a safe, decent, and culturally appropriate way. And we, along with many others, are calling on the government to do this in various ways through investments in a universal livable income and improved social safety nets, instead of investing only in emergency food relief like food banks. It also looks collective and allied. So really getting past this way of thinking that we are just individuals and all we can do is vote with our dollars as consumers, and instead stepping into our power as citizens, voters, young professionals, friends, neighbors, organizers, and really acknowledging the commonalities between movements and communities like the fight for climate justice, decent work, and food justice, and actions in solidarity with Indigenous land defenders across Turtle Island. And then the last thing is really simple, but I think that transformation looks beautiful. And this is not to say that it won't be uncomfortable. I think tensions and discomfort are really inherent in change and growth, but I think that many of these actions and developments are also really inherently beautiful. And then I just want to mention really quickly, we're going to be digging into a lot of these ideas as part of a series of online conversations that Food Secure Canada is hosting next month called Cultivating Change. And I'd really encourage all of you who've tuned in to go to our website, check out the details, and register if you'd like to join.
Fantastic. Well, those are wonderful words. I've got empowering, collective, allied, beautiful, and uncomfortable. So I really appreciate that vision. It's fantastic. We have a few minutes left just to further dig into this a little bit more before we go to our next speaker. And I think what I want to hold up is this idea of a national food policy, because I know many other countries have been thinking about this, have been trying to figure out how to move forward with this. And I think Canada is a little bit of a beacon of hope where this people's policy project came from and where it has gone. So just wondering if you can say in the last minute, just where you see the greatest potential for this project to move us as a country.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest potential is in the opening of sort of the ambitious framing of the policy itself, which is really, I think, embraced the intersectionality of a lot of the issues in the food system. And we really saw that in the way that the policy, like the wording and the description. So I think that opens up a lot of room for collaboration across departments and ministries within the federal government. And the other really big piece of this is the Canadian Food Policy Advisory Council. So it's a council of citizens to inform the implementation and design of the sort of nitty-gritty of the policy. So we're really looking and waiting for that to be called and put together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for the Q&A. But meanwhile, we're going to travel south to Minnesota now for our next speaker. So I would now like to welcome Sean Sherman, CEO and founder, the Sioux Chef and natives.org, who is joining us live from Minnesota. And we've had a little taste of that with that quick little video snip. Sean, can you please turn on your camera and microphone?
Good to go.
Good to go. Fantastic. Well, first of all, I just shout out, I love your cookbook and I encourage everyone to purchase a copy. It's called The Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. So thank you for being the heart and soul behind that. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, as have my kids. So Sean, tell us about your work, what you do, and your impact.
Sure. So our focus is on North American traditional indigenous food systems, which happens to be the name of our nonprofit. It's the acronym NATIFS. So Natives is the biggest project we've been working on of trying to bring awareness to indigenous education and making indigenous foods more accessible. So we're using culinary as the kind of the center of that, because we really believe that hands-on culinary training is such an important part. Our food systems is one of the most important things that we can protect and preserve, especially for the future generations. And we see so much benefit of understanding indigenous food systems. So part of this work was identifying what is indigenous education and realizing that that is just thousands of generations of knowledge that was handed down to our indigenous ancestors, giving us the blueprints to live sustainably utilizing the plants and animals around us. And it's such a robust education that the Western education has really largely ignored for so long. And our history of going through a lot of the assimilation efforts with the boarding schools and residential schools and losing so much of the knowledge of our ancestors was such a damaging part of history for us. So we truly believe that it's going to be really important to relearn as much of this knowledge as possible. So it's a study of native agriculture and seed saving and soil management and farming techniques and wild food and ethnobotany and plant identification, medicinals, food preservation and culinary, language, crafting, arts, history. It all combines together. And it's really about reconnecting us with our land spaces and truly understanding how to, again, live sustainably with what is around us. So we have just opened up a nonprofit kitchen here in Minneapolis, Minnesota called Indigenous Food Lab, where we are busy setting up this kitchen for training, for education, for development and support. So our vision is having this education kitchen that's fully functioning. We've actually been feeding up to 400 people every day in our community throughout this time period of the pandemic and also the social uprisings that happened here in Minnesota, and just trying to feed food insecure community members and just get healthy indigenous foods out there and help to normalize that. But our goal is to have this education kitchen where we can work directly with tribal communities and help them to develop their own indigenous food programming for their community. So there's at least one healthy access point for indigenous foods that we will help them develop to be about them and for them, utilizing their language, their land, their plants, and utilizing us as that development and support center. Our goal is to eventually replicate this model and open up indigenous food labs in cities all over the nation and eventually all over the continent. So we could be throughout the US in cities like Seattle, Denver, Albuquerque, Chicago, Boston. But we can also cross borders. So we can be throughout Canada, we can be up in Alaska, we can be down in Mexico. And eventually we can do this on a global scale because we see the need for to protect and preserve indigenous knowledge on this global scale, because indigenous peoples around the globe carry these commonalities of living sustainably, being so deeply connected to our environments. And we feel this is a great way for humanity to take steps forward to a healthier future.
Sean, that's fantastic. I have so many questions for you. The first question, just to this point about the food lab being able to travel far and wide. Can you just tell us a little bit about others that you're already connected with? I know you're already working with other Indigenous chefs and Indigenous communities. Can you just give us a little bit of a flavor of that?
Sure, we've been able to connect with friends and Indigenous colleagues in this food sovereignty movement that's been really kind of bursting and really moving forward. So it's been really exciting. In the past few years, for me, was a lot of travel as my business partner and I moved around and were able to visit a lot of Indigenous communities from the Pacific Northwest to Alaska to down in Mexico and the East Coast, down in Florida. And it's just so exciting to think about how much work is out there and how doable it is to bring back Indigenous knowledge and especially around foodways back into our communities, because we really truly believe, especially during this pandemic, that it's shown us how vulnerable we can be to be over-reliant on foods that are not coming from our areas and unhealthy foods in general. So we just really want to be role models and show a clear path of how we can all work together, how we can all be connected together, have larger voices to really speak out against any atrocities against Indigenous peoples that are still happening in today's world, and to really bring us back to understanding how regional Indigenous food systems can be so important to everybody.
So Sean, I had the absolute pleasure of sitting beside you one night for dinner, which I still think of often very fondly. And I was just really struck by your own personal story, and especially the story about how you tried to access traditional recipes and where there were opportunities for that and challenges in finding those recipes. Can you just speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would always tease that I couldn't just go online and order Joy of Native American Cooking, you know, because it didn't exist. So I spent quite a few years of researching and trying to understand, like, personally what my Lakota ancestors were eating, because I grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, and I'm enrolled with the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. And when I had this revelation that, you know, I can name hundreds of European recipes off the top of my head and only a handful of Lakota recipes, it was really striking. And just realizing how erased that knowledge base was. And, you know, we lost, because a lot of that knowledge was so oral throughout a lot of our communities. And we had so much death and assimilation going through our communities that we lost so much of it. You know, here in the US, Indigenous peoples weren't citizens until the 20s. We went through a few generations through the 40s and 60s of relocation and termination policies. We couldn't vote until the 1960s, through the 80s, even for some communities. We couldn't celebrate our religions until the late 70s, which is well within my lifetime. And there's just so much, you know, I feel like this generation is a generation of reclamation. And we truly believe that our generation has to be stewards of this Indigenous knowledge base to move forward, because it is something that we can all utilize on this global scale.
So your vision, Sean, you've already touched on it, but just pull it up in a brighter light. What does food system transformation look like for you?
We just really want to get people back better connected with the world around us. We want to showcase the use of all these wonderful plant beings nearby us. The Western diet has never really touched so much of this, and the Indigenous diets have so much plant diversity within their communities or within their knowledge bases, and it's going to be so important just to reconnect, you know. So we just see a beautiful system where we have more community gardens that we're landscaping with purpose and putting food plants around us, having trained kitchens and staff that can process a lot of these foods, utilizing a lot of traditional methods, and just preserving a lot of the diversity and celebrating the diversity that sits here across this continent.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thrilled to have you here for part of this conversation. So stay tuned for the Q&A, but meanwhile, we're now going to travel south to Mexico for our next speaker. Great. I would now like to welcome Valiana Aguilar, Mayan Indigenous activist, co-founder of Sumilmutan, a learning space for youth in Sinanche, Yucatan. Valiana is joining us from Mexico. We've just seen a beautiful picture of corn, of course, Mexico being the birthplace of corn. Valiana, can you please turn on your camera and microphone?
Buenas tardes. Hi, everyone.
Valiana, so pleased you could join us today. And I would love to hear a little bit about what you do and your impact with your work with youth in the Yucatan.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you for the invitation. And also thank you of my friends that just speak here. It was beautiful to hear them all. And first of all, I am Mayan. I'm Indigenous Maya from the Yucatan Peninsula. So in our work, in our community, we have our base in the Milpa. And the Milpa, it's our food system, right, of the Mayan people. It's the way that we planted together maize, beans, and squash or pumpkins together in a very beautiful way, but it is not only that. It's several medicinal plants and also with other vegetables that grows in the Milpa. So in our work with youth and children and elders, we are trying to learn collectively how we reclaim again that knowledge of Milpa and put it in the center in our own communal way, in our own communal terms also. The Milpa, it's our life. We are the people from maize, from corn. So what we are trying to do is to reclaim again that knowledge and to plant again the milpa. And for that, we have this space in our community, and we work there with children, youth, and elders collectively. So we ask them, to the elders, to teach us how is the milpa, what is the milpa. And then they are showing us, they tell us, we are not giving you classes. If you want to learn how to make milpa, you need to go with us and make your own milpa. So we decided to create this space, not only for talking, but also for the practice of the milpa, that at the end is our life as an Indigenous Mayan communities, because it's the base of what we eat. Every day in our community, we eat maize, corn in several ways. So that's what we call the people from maize. So in our space, we are trying to learn more with the elders, and especially to come back as youth to the land, because now we have several issues related to that, like all the youth we have a big migration of the youth through the cities, and they didn't come back to the communities. So because of that, we are trying to advance this small project in our community.
That's fantastic, Valiana. One question I have, just because it's so interesting, this connection between the elders and the youth. And I'm just wondering, in your experience, in those discussions and conversations, what are the main kind of questions that are coming up, or the main discussion points? Especially what are the youth really keen on talking about and understanding? Can you give us a bit more of a flavor of that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, the main question of the elders to us is why you are leaving us, like why you are leaving the milpa. And we say, like, because of many systems that are like discriminate us all the time. The schools and the universities are always saying that the work of the land, it's not worth it anymore. So you need to go to the cities and work for the enterprises, for the companies, so you could be a better person. And we say no. To be a better person is to be in community, growing in our own way our food and eating our own food. And because of that, we are trying to have this conversation with the elders and say how important it is to still being on the ground with the soil in our hands also. That's what we are trying to advance in this space also.
Fantastic. So Valiana, you come from such a long, beautiful, rich tradition, and that's all behind you. What's in front of you? What's your vision for the food system, for future food, and what does food system transformation look like for you and your community?
Well, a food system transformation will be to reclaim again our own ways, to plant our own food, our own ancestral food. And that means that for us, the age of the corn that we have is 10,000 years ago. So we have been planting corn since many generations. Will be to come back to that of what we have, and to come back and still being the people of maize, the people of corn. And of course, we have several problems here. We have many problems facing. We are facing many problems as GMO seeds coming into our communities. We have mega projects coming again and trying to dispossess our lands. So we say that if we want to defend our lands, we need to come back to our land and plant again as youth and with the children, but of course in the hand of the elders, that they keep and preserve their knowledge. And of course we need to, as Indigenous women, we need also to have and connect again with this tenderness in the center, with this care, and with this love all our seeds, on our ancestral seeds, but also as this richness in the food that we are eating every day, because the way that we resist is eating our food and sitting collectively in the table. And of course, connecting with other initiatives. I want to come back of what Susana said, that we need to reweave our generations, but also weave with other initiatives that are in the same and learn collectively.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Valiana, for sharing your story with us. Please stand by for the Q&A. We're now going to travel south to Costa Rica for our final speaker. Off we go to Costa Rica. Beautiful. I'm sure we all wish we could visit those beautiful green, lush hills. I would now like to welcome Roberto Azofefa, who is the Chief of Agro-Environmental Production Department with the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock in Costa Rica. Roberto, can you please turn on your camera and your microphone if you're able?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be part of this experience.
Fantastic. So Roberto, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and the impact that your work is having?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I work in the agricultural extension program. I mean, I'm extension official in my country at the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. I've been working since 30 years ago, and I've been involved in several projects promoting sustainable food systems. On the diverse approaches or paradigms, like, for example, soil and water conservation, watershed management, agroforestry, organic production, good agricultural practices, climate change, adaptation and mitigation, low external inputs, integrated resource management, climate smart agriculture, among others. And more recently, I'm leading the Ecological Blue Flag program, which is an initiative increasing in participation of farmers year after year. Its objective is to encourage the application of best practices for the sustainable management of natural resources in agricultural production. Soil and water resource management, agrochemicals, residues, fuel and electricity consumption, social responsibility, animal welfare, climate change adaptation are the topics in which participants in the program, farmers who participate in the program, must to demonstrate advances every year through an annual inform. And farmers who get the score between 19 to 1,000 of the points get an award, which is the Ecological Blue Flag. And the communication of this award to the consumers is a very interesting form to connect farmers and consumers. So it's an interesting contribution in terms of the sustainability of the program, of the sustainability in the food systems. Especially for farmers who are connected to international marketing, but also for local consumption in local gastronomy and tourism. We have now interesting results in terms of how farmers are interested to put in practice this kind of good or best practices we stimulate in agricultural production.
Great, thank you, Roberto. The other question I want to ask you is what I've asked of the other panelists as well. For the people listening in today, what does food system transformation look like to you?
Well, according to my experience, if we work a lot in terms of the production side at farm, it's not possible to advance to have the impact we are looking for in terms of the sustainability of the systems. Because, well, three main big topics I consider are needed to get the transformation of the food systems into sustainable food systems. One is consumer education and information. Other is eco-efficiency, and number three, but not less important, is food biodiversity or agrobiodiversity. The role of consumption sector is crucial in terms of what and how farmers produce food. It is essential to educate consumers about the values, efforts, and impacts involved in the food production phase of the agri-chains, and through such information, stimulate best choices. Impacts in terms of social, environment, and economic aspect, but also in terms of nutrition and health for consumers. Regard to eco-efficiency, the role of research and extension bodies is also crucial, working together to generate practical solutions on technologies to produce more with less. More food with less water, less soil, less residues, less greenhouse gas emissions, less biodiversity degradation. The phenomenon of food production is complex. Is my experience in my job during 30 years. With regard to food systems, it is required to promote connections among gastronomy, among what we eat, with protection and reinforcement of biodiversity for future generations, good life, particularly agrobiodiversity for better nutrition and better life for all. Protection of our planet requires active participation of all, technology and inputs provider, producers, traders, retailers, governmental actors, international organizations, and consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. That's a fabulous list. Thank you to all the speakers. I would like to ask you all to join us. Turn your cameras and your microphones on for the Q&A. So I'll just wait a minute till I see you all up on the screen. I think the first question I'd like to ask is, drawing from what everybody has said, but in particular what Roberto was just talking about, what you describe, Roberto, as your vision is built on a whole bunch of values that you hold dear. And I think every speaker has spoken from a place of values. And I just want to elevate those a little bit because these are so important for the Global Alliance. We have 7 what we call principles that define our future of food, including resilience and equity and diversity and others. And I'm just wondering if I can point to each of you and have you lift up what are the core values that underpin the visions that you so beautifully outlined. So maybe I can just point to each of you in turn. Maybe I'll start with Sean. Sean, what are the values that are really underpinning the work that you're doing in the US?
You know, it's really about connectivity and community, I think, are the biggest values. And we really look at the values that we hold as Indigenous peoples and really try to bring that through in a modern day and really keep that at the heart of how we move forward. But it's really about creating a larger community. And I feel like in today's world, community has a different thing because we're connected with people on a much larger scale. And we feel for everybody the way that what we're going through. So those are the values that we really hold on to.
Thank you. Susanna, what about for you?
Yeah, it's wonderful because we've just undergone a process of sort of redefining and rearticulating our values as an organization. And fortunately, I don't have it right in front of me, but a lot of I remember several of them, of course. One is interconnectivity and interconnectedness, trust, is definitely really high up there, something that we're trying to build internally and with all the folks that we work with. Justice is very important to us and finding ways of achieving that through our work. Yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there for now.
Fantastic, thank you. Valiana?
Thank you. I will say that the one of the values that we have is, first of all, comunalidad or comunitariedad, the way that we organize ourselves collectively in community. And of course, that's on one of the main things. And we rule ourselves as in asamblea or assemblies also, and take decisions collectively. So that's one of the points that we wanted to, in the sense and care, are the main things that bond us together as women, as Indigenous women, but especially with the food and the cultivation of the milpa.
Fantastic, thank you. And Roberto, what are the values that are leading you in your work?
Well, I understand that we are part of the nature. We are nature, and nature is us. So for many years working in the agricultural sector, and seeing a lot of farmers that disappear because they can be stable in his life and producing food because market, because main of our decisions are based on money. So for me, it's quite wrong, because we have to understand that all of us need food every day, and farmers know how to produce food, but perhaps farmers need help in order to better produce food. So well, I'm here in the extension program trying to promote not only positive changes in terms of food production, but also positive changes in terms of consumption of food. So I'm really fascinated with my job. I can I can talk about very good experiences trying to connect the gastronomy service with producers in local areas. And for me, I have evidence to demonstrate that it is possible to have sustainable subsistence. But yeah, we need to continue working and giving information not only to producers, but also to consumers.
Great. So Roberto, that's almost what a lot of people are calling a call to action. And maybe just to use your final comments there as almost your call to action, getting information to producers and consumers as a really critical component to what transformation looks like and how we're going to get there. And maybe I can just look to the other three speakers in the few minutes that we have left to ask you really quickly, if you had one call to action for the global community, what would it be? So Susanna, quick call to action that you would put out there.
I mean, voting is really important. Again, we're talking about policy and governments, so exercising your right as a citizen to vote if you're able. And then the other one is to join a collective movement, whether that's for food justice or climate justice or the intersections, or supporting Indigenous land defenders. Get involved and do more than just exercising your power with your dollar, would be my call to action.
Great. Both very important at this time in history. Thank you.
Yes.
Valiana, one quick call to action to the global community from you.
Well, I think it will be for youth, and especially with the Indigenous youth and children also, to come back to the land. That's why, that's where our resistance is. That's where we are going to be in harmony with nature also, as we used to be, and especially to come back to our elders. We saw what it happened with the pandemic and how they were relieved in some countries. So we are taking them and learning from them and come back to their knowledge and reclaim that knowledge. That's what I say.
Fantastic. So important. Thank you, Valiana. And Sean, finally, call to action.
I would say people really need to just get out there and learn about and support the Indigenous initiatives around you and how you can support them, whether it's education or food entrepreneurs or producers, whatever they might be. And it's so important just to learn the history of the land that you're on and the struggles that Indigenous peoples had to endure and the resilience that had to come through that, and why it's so special and unique that Indigenous peoples are still here today to share their voices and to share their own stories.
Oh, thank you. So fantastic. There's so much more we could say, but you guys have all said it beautifully and eloquently and powerfully. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being part of the 24-hour relay, such important perspectives to hold up. And I love the themes that came up around nature, justice, culture, biodiversity, health, active participation, trust, interconnection, community. I could go on and on and on in terms of these key words that I think have come up today. So hopefully that leaves everybody inspired and hopeful. And this is the end of our session. The live stream will stop for a few minutes, and then we will come online with the final block of 4 sessions of this 24-hour relay. So again, thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to all the participants, and we'll see you in a few minutes.